Hey everyone, per your requests, I'm starting Soul Land 5, The Rebirth of Tang today. My channel isn't monetized, so if you're able to, please support me on PayPal to help me stay active. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the story of Soul Land 5, The Rebirth of Tang.
As Zhang Haoshuan told them about each demon emperor, Wu Bingji and the others couldn't and oppose. T helped but turn pale. These formidable beings were the ones they would have to resist in the future, as they led humanity forward. They finally understood why these things were not taught in the classrooms of the Redemption Academy. The teachers were likely worried that knowing too soon would dampen their fighting spirit. Indeed, even now, with some achievements, they still listen with ashen faces. The fourth-ranked demon emperor, known as the Sky-Splitting Demon Emperor, hails from the Behemoth clan, renowned as the invincible titans of the land. Their physical strength is possibly the greatest among all demons. The clan faces low birth rates, and they have fewer than 1,000 members. However, each one is an immensely formidable presence. A ninth-order behemoth demon might even challenge god-level opponents. The Sky-Splitting Demon Emperor is deemed indestructible. His claws can destroy the heavens and obliterate the earth. The fifth-ranked Demon Emperor, the owner of the hotel we and Oppos currently staying in, is the White Tiger Demon Emperor. The lineage of the White Tiger comes from a mutation, and their numbers are relatively few. The White Tiger Demon Emperor is notoriously protective and holds grudges fiercely. Among all emperors, it is the most dangerous to offend. It has wings on its back which allow it to reign over heaven and earth alike. Thus, its title is and Oppos, heaven-crossing, earth-piercing, and Oppos. The sixth-ranked Demon Emperor, known as the Dark Demon Emperor, is a dark demon dragon. Dragons are a special race, much like behemoths. However, while behemoths are one clan with the same abilities, dragons come in a bizarre variety, including fire, water, earth, wind, and more. Legend has it that in ancient times, pure dragons were notoriously promiscuous, but due to their powerful bloodline, their descendants were all dragonkind, regardless of what species they mated with. This resulted in dragons with a multitude of attributes. For example, the Crystal Demon Emperor is a mutation within the dragonkind, supposedly from a union between a radiant dragon and a dark dragon. This pairing should have found it impossible to produce offspring. Yet somehow it was born. The dragonkind made some attempts to replicate it, but they all failed. Either there was no offspring, or if there was, they died young. Anyway, this Dark Demon Emperor is a pure darkness element being. Although it's only ranked 6th overall, none of the higher-ranked demon emperors would dare claim they could defeat it at night. Dubai asked, Mayor, there are 2 demon emperors among the dragonkind? Zhang Haoshuan nodded. Indeed, this only goes to show the strength of dragons. And now, with the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor, the phoenixes also have 2. They just dawn in Oppos. T rank as high as the dragons. As you can see, the strength of one in Oppos' bloodline is crucial for demons and nymphs. The Dark Demon Emperor is known as the Eternal Night Sovereign, for obvious reasons. That title is so cool, exclaimed Dubai. The mayor glared at him before continuing. The 7th-ranked Demon Emperor has a golden bloodline. The Mammoth Demon Emperor, from the Golden Mammoth clan and leader of the Elephant Demons, is acclaimed as the strongest in defense among the demon emperors. Even the Sky-Splitting Demon Emperor would struggle to breach its defenses. The Mammoth Demon Emperor and Oppos' title is Golden Radiance, signifying the pride of his golden bloodline. The 8th-ranked Demon Emperor is the Sword Saint Demon Emperor, of the Red-Crowned Crane lineage, and it has the sharpest attacks among the demon emperors. Didn't an Oppos' you encounter a Red-Crowned Crane in your group battle? That was a member of this lineage. Not only is their swordsmanship formidable, but they are also the best when it comes to teamwork. It and Oppos' said that the Sword Saint Demon Emperor has a 3,600-strong troop known as the Crane Swords, and when they unite under his command, they can display terrifying power. Its title is and Oppos', Cloud Soaring, and Oppos'. Its physical strength is nothing to write home about, but its swordsmanship and overall combat skills distinguish him among the demon emperors. The 9th-ranked, naturally, is the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor, whom you have seen from a distance. He is a rather unique figure. Originally, his lineage was unlikely to achieve the rank of Demon Emperor. However, it seems a special opportunity arose, and he successfully broke through, elevating the Crystal Phoenix lineage. This newly ascended Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor is still behind in strength compared to the other 8, and needs to accumulate more experience. Nevertheless, he is a Demon Emperor, and his strength is not to be underestimated. Once he stabilizes his cultivation, he will also be formidable. His title is an Apos, Crystallizer of Heaven and Earth and Apos. With this, the introductions of the 9 Demon Emperors were complete. 9 names and 9 titles lingered in the minds of Tang San and his 4 companions. Ranked first, the Omnipotent Crystal Demon Emperor. Ranked second, the Master of Fate Celestial Fox Demon Emperor. Ranked third, the Eternal Inferno Undying Demon Emperor. Ranked fourth, the Unbreakable Sky-Splitting Demon Emperor. Ranked fifth, the Heaven-Crossing Earth-Piercing White Tiger Demon Emperor. Ranked sixth, the Eternal Night Sovereign Dark Demon Emperor. Ranked seventh, the Golden Radiance Mammoth Demon Emperor. Ranked 8th, the Cloud Soaring Sword Saint Demon Emperor. Ranked 9th, the Crystallizer of Heaven and Earth Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor. The only one among the Shrek squad who had actually seen a Demon Emperor proper was Tang San, and the only one he'd seen was the Crystal Demon Emperor. The other 8 Demon Emperors were known to them only by name. Yet, just these names and titles made them feel immense pressure. The other 4 wondered if they could ever truly stand against such beings. In Tang San and Apos' mind, it was a definite no. If humanity kept progressing as it did, then even in 1,000 years, and maybe even in 10,000 years, they would still be unable to contend with the demons. And that wasn't even considering the nymphs. Yet Tang San felt a strange sensation. Perhaps his arrival in this world was meant to transform the impossible into the possible. The greater the pressure, the more exhilarated he felt. He took a deep breath, and his face seemed to light up with divine light as he looked at Zhang Haoshuan and asked, "Master, what about the nymph emperors?" Zhang Haoshuan looked deeply at Tang San, noticing that his pupil had not shown any signs of despair when he heard about the tremendous strength of the 9 demon emperors. It was clear that his resolve was steadfast. The Redemption Society didn't and Apos' usually introduced the top powers of the demon continent to avoid dampening the students' and Apos' fighting spirit. After all, even as teachers, they felt a profound fear when contemplating these beings. Any one of the demon emperors could destroy all of humanity. There are only 7 nymph emperors, but Dawn and Apos' think for a second that the nymphs are weaker than the demons. The nymphs are more united. The relationships between their clans are closer, and their cultivation methods differ from those of the demons. Put simply, the demon races are distinctly separate from each other due to their bloodlines each having their own attributes. These innate differences prevent them from becoming too close. The nymph races, however, are not. They are mostly related to plants, and their bloodlines have far higher potential to merge. In fact, they can even graft multiple bloodlines. In essence, a clever grafting of several nymph bloodlines might even produce a stronger race. The nymph races don't face the innate rejection seen among demons, nor do they encounter problems like those of the lion tigers. The more inclusive nature of the nymph races fosters closer and more united relationships among them. In terms of overall strength, the Solstice Empire is not much weaker than the Empyrean Dominion. The top-ranked nymph emperor, the Sunborn Nymph Emperor, is second in the ancestral court, so it ranks above the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor. It's a solitary known as the Sunborn Flower, and its bloodline was created over centuries of careful cultivation and grafting, from the sunflower nymphs and 8 other nymph bloodlines. The process involved several powerful bloodlines and plenty of failures, and it has the same problem as some other solitaries. Its bloodline cannot be replicated. It's 2,000 years old by now, and if the Solstice Empire cannot produce another like it, they will have a serious problem. Its title and Apos', sun-nurtured and Apos', acknowledges its unique heritage. What are its powers? Tang San asked. Idan and Apos' know. There are few records of it taking action, but it and Apos' acknowledged as the strongest among the nymphs, ranked just below the Crystal Demon Emperor. As for who is stronger between it and the Crystal Demon Emperor, there and Apos' no clear consensus. However, it must be truly mighty for it to rank above the Master of Fate, not to mention the latter must acknowledge it as well, explained Zhang Haoshuan. The second-ranked nymph emperor is known as the Earthshade Nymph Emperor. It's an earthshade grass, and it is co-ruling the world of the nymphs with the sunborn nymph emperor in a balance of light and darkness. Just like the sunborn flower, the earth shade nymph emperor is the result of grafting multiple bloodlines. It's not as unique or difficult to replicate, but whether the new sprouts can attain the nymph emperor level is a different story altogether. It and Aphos said that the Earthshade Nymph Emperor possesses the power to control the earth and exert a strong suppressive force over other nymph clans. Thus, its title is and Aphos, Earth Suppressor and Aphos. Among the nymph races of the Solstice Empire, the authority of these two surpasses that of the other five, making them the true rulers of the Solstice Empire. Tang San noted that Zhang Haoshuan didn't detail the powers of the Sunborn Nymph Emperor or the Earthshade Nymph Emperor. Undoubtedly, this implied that the Redemption Society's knowledge of the nymphs in the Solstice Empire wasn't as extensive as that of the Empyrean Dominion. Or perhaps, the nymph races were relatively more reserved. However, being on par with the Crystal Demon Emperor and the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor meant that the power of these two nymph emperors was without a doubt formidable. Zhang Haoshuan continued, ranked third among the nymph emperors is the Soul Capturer Nymph Emperor, a soul capturer tree. His spiritual power is incredible. Among all the demon emperors and nymph emperors, only the Crystal Demon Emperor might match it in spiritual power. It and Aphos said that wherever the Soul Capturer Nymph Emperor passes, it can control everything, especially the nymph and tree beings. It even has the power to give rise to life, turning lifeless stones into sentient entities. Its title is and Aphos, Animator of the Inanimate, and Aphos. The fourth-ranked nymph emperor is called the Parasol Tree Nymph Emperor. It might sound odd for a tree, but its attribute is actually fire. It can burn anything and convert it into its own sustenance, so its title is and Aphos, Heaven-Burning Earth-Boiling and Aphos. Although it and Aphos only fourth among the nymph emperors, it and Aphos crucial to note that it has the closest relationship with the demon emperors, as his partner is the Undying Demon Emperor. They are a pair. As Zhang Haoshuan spoke, the words phoenix nesting in the parasol tree flashed through Tang San and Aphos' mind. Undoubtedly, when these two were together, their combined strength likely increased dramatically, making them an immensely formidable duo. The demon and nymph emperors were already powerful enough by themselves. To think they even had marital alliances. How could other races thrive? The third-ranked demon emperor and the fourth-ranked nymph emperor together make up a formidable pair, feared across the demon continent. However, due to the overwhelming strength of their union, they voluntarily gave up control of their cities when they decided to come together, choosing instead to reside within the ancestral court to alleviate the fears of other demon and nymph emperors. Within the ancestral court, their authority is immense. Even the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor, who usually presides over daily affairs, shows them great deference. Moving on, the fifth-ranked Nymph Emperor is a rather peculiar being. As mentioned earlier, the Soul Capturer Nymph Emperor has the ability to animate stone, and this Nymph Emperor is precisely that, stone. It is a glazed stone that gained spirituality and eventually reached the 12th tier. Apparently it has a myriad of mysterious abilities, which earned it the title of the thousand-faceted glazed glass Nymph Emperor. The sixth-ranked is the Diamond Nymph Emperor, a piece of diamond spirit that gains sentience. Diamond spirit is a type of metallic or renowned as the hardest substance in existence. It does not conduct any kind of energy, and it actually possesses resistance against almost all attributes. Therefore, while the Diamond Nymph Emperor's offensive abilities are somewhat average, it is the strongest among all the Nymph Emperors in terms of pure defense. When demons and nymphs talk about the and Aphos, absolute toughest and Aphos, that's who they are talking about. The title of the Diamond Nymph Emperor is and Aphos, Indestructible and Aphos. His relationship with the sky-splitting Demon Emperor is quite poor, perhaps due to them having opposing abilities. They and Aphos fought many times. Although it cannot defeat the sky-splitting Demon Emperor, the latter also can and Aphos do much against the Diamond Nymph Emperor. These clashes are what made them famous. The seventh and final Nymph Emperor is known as the Endless Nymph Emperor. It's said to be a bottomless spring that cultivated the water attribute to its extreme. Hence it is called an Aphos, endless water. And Aphos, among all the demon emperors and nymph emperors, it has the largest attack range. It can control rivers, lakes, and seas, and it is the master of the water element. The name in Aphos, endless and Aphos, is derived from the endless blue sea, showcasing his control over all waters. His official title is and Appos, Universe Flooding, and Appos. With that, Zhang Haoshuan finished outlining the basic details of the 7 nymph emperors. Sun-nurtured sun-born nymph emperor. Earth suppressor earth-shade nymph emperor. Animator of the inanimate soul capturer nymph emperor. Heaven-burning earth-boiling parasol tree nymph emperor. Thousand-faceted glazed glass nymph emperor. Indestructible diamond nymph emperor. Universe-flooding endless nymph emperor. Just these titles alone were enough to fuel the imagination. 9 demon emperors and 7 nymph emperors. These were the pillars of power on the demon continent, and they were truly mighty pillars. And that was not even considering the possibility of hidden superpowers. Tang San murmured sunborn flower, earthshade grass, soul capturer tree, parasol tree, glazed glass, diamond spirit, endless water. They encompass yin and yang flowers, grasses, trees, and stones. They even include wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. They embody all aspects of nature. Impressive. With this in mind, it made perfect sense to him that the nymph emperors were on par with the demon emperors despite being fewer in numbers. They shared a close bond and their powers complemented each other, so they could very well deal with the individualistic demon emperors. This was the ancestral court. Although these mighty beings might not all reside within the court itself, they were nevertheless the rulers of this world. Most importantly, they were the obstacles humanity faced on its path to a brighter future. Zhang Haoshuan took a deep breath and said, "Shocking Iasin and Appos. Tiet? That and Appos, s right. This is the demon continent we must face. The true demon continent. This land belongs to them and is controlled by them. They are what we must confront in the future. So, as I just told Tang San, your primary task over the next few days is to tour their palaces. You can only understand the gap between us by truly experiencing their aura and the pressure it brings. Moreover, I hope that in observing and experiencing, you might grasp some abilities that align with your attributes. Undeniably, if we humans wish to grow stronger and catch up to them, for now we must follow their path." Zhang Haoshuan spoke earnestly. The 5 members of the Shrek squad nodded in agreement. This was indeed the world they had to face. Zhang Haoshuan turned to Tang San and said, "I will be leaving tomorrow, so I and Appos, we only rented this room for 1 day. You all stay in my room and cultivate today. Tomorrow, when I return to headquarters to report, you and Appos, LL start visiting the palaces of the ancestral court." Wu Bingji and Appos, S pupils contracted, so didn't and Appos. We just waste our money on the room? Can we still cancel it now? Zhang Haoshuan replied irritably, "Think of it as tuition for the newly arrived. Do you think the White Tiger Demon Emperor runs a charity? No refunds. Now let and Appos make the most of our time." Wu Bingji wanted to say more but ultimately held back, though his face was regretful. Under Zhang Haoshuan and Appos' lead, the 6 entered the cultivation room. It had to be said a Demon King level cultivation room was indeed different. It was spacious and it easily accommodated all 6 of them. The 6 sat down on the spot, each meditating, absorbing the dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth within the room to nourish themselves. Zhang Haoshuan did not compete with his disciples for this spiritual energy. He was more interested in the energies that could feed his divine consciousness. Elevating spiritual power to the level of divine consciousness represented a qualitative leap. However, this transformation didn't and Appos necessarily speed up the pace of cultivation. On the contrary, cultivating divine consciousness was harder than cultivating mere spiritual power, requiring greater enlightenment. In fact, comprehension and enlightenment were the key factors, even outweighing one's bloodline cultivation. For Zhang Haoshuan, advancing to the god level had been a monumental challenge, and further advancement would be incredibly difficult. As for improving his divine consciousness, that was even more challenging. Thus, the cultivation room here, capable of enhancing divine consciousness, was especially beneficial to him. More accurately, it wasn't an Appos actually enhancement proper but rather nurturing. Nurturing Wuden and Appos push his divine consciousness to advance, but it could stabilize it. This made it worth the price of the room for demon kings, and even less needed to be said about demon emperors. Thus, the White Tiger Demon Emperor had been rather inspired to establish this hotel. Tang San silently immersed himself in cultivation. quietly sensing the changes within himself. The nourishment of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was unnecessary for him. He was not in a hurry to enhance his mysterious heaven technique to a higher order. On the contrary, he had to suppress it for now. In the future, to advance to the god level, he had to first ensure that he had 9 powerful bloodline imprints, and the imprints all reached the peak of the 9th order. Therefore, developing his companions at his current cultivation level was more important, particularly the challenging celestial fox transformation. But divine consciousness was different. Nurturing it meant he could strengthen it. There was no bottleneck in advancing his divine consciousness, as it was once at the level of a god king. Although his current spiritual power had not yet reached the level of divine consciousness, preventing him from actually improving his original one directly, the gradual nurturing of his spiritual power was still effective, albeit slow. Each minute increase in his divine consciousness equated to greater control over the powers from his past life. He quickly sensed what kind of energy within the cultivation room could directly nurture divine consciousness. It was a kind of will belonging to someone with a powerful divine consciousness. This will could enlighten weaker divine consciousness, exerting a certain pressure at the same time. Enlightenment, coupled with pressure, could push a divine consciousness to advance. Tang San and Appo's divine consciousness had now roughly doubled in strength since it was first used at that time. He used it to intimidate 2 12th-tier demon emperors and even kill a demon king. Now, he could use it twice without exhausting it, or once if he decided to go all out. The recovery rate was slow, but he could do nothing about it. However, coming here to cultivate today gave him a sense of a bright new possibility. The Demon King Suite in Appo's cultivation room had a noticeable stimulating effect on his divine consciousness. Then, what about the Demon Emperor Suite? How would that affect it? Would it enhance his divine consciousness even more? This thought gave Tang San some room to imagine what the Demon Emperor Suite might be like. After half a day and a whole night of cultivation, when Tang San emerged from his meditative state, he distinctly felt a slight improvement in his divine consciousness. It was minor on the grander scale, but it was still equivalent to about half a month of his usual cultivation. In other words, his cultivation here would be 10 to 15 times as fast, and over a longer period of time this would accumulate. Since arriving at the ancestral court, this was the first time he experienced the benefits it brought him, and he was overjoyed. Although the pace of improvement was still slow overall, it was much faster than before. And there were still higher-level Demon Emperor suites, weren't there? Zhang Haoshuan had also finished his cultivation. He looked spirited and clearly had a successful session the previous night. You're up, huh? The others are still meditating. According to the time, the room is ours until noon, so you might as well stay here and cultivate. We and Appo's head back at noon. I and Appo's off to report to headquarters. Zhang Haoshuan called Tang San to the living room and told him, Master, could I ask you for a favor before you go? Tang San asked. Sure, tell me, Zhang Haoshuan said. Tang San said, could you please ask at the front desk how many places in the ancestral court offer cultivation rooms, hotel and Appo's for demon kings or even great demon kings to enhance divine consciousness, and which one is the best? Zhang Haoshuan replied, all right, I and Appo's I'll go ask in a bit. This cultivation room really is great. After you guys return safely, I might stay here a while longer. Continual cultivation here could significantly benefit the stability and enhancement of my divine consciousness. If my divine consciousness grows stronger, I believe it will even positively affect my bloodline. Tang San smiled slightly and said, no need to rush with the bloodline. I and Appo's have already thought of a method to enhance it further. It should work. Oh, Zhang Haoshuan asked, surprised, enhance my bloodline strength? Tang San nodded and said, but not right now, we and Appo's will need to wait a bit longer. Fine. I and Appo's only just made a breakthrough, so there and Appo's no rush, Zhang Haoshuan said. Tang San and Appo's method for enhancing Zhang Haoshuan and Appo's bloodline was naturally related to the Lion Tiger clan. If a powerhouse from the Lion Tiger clan could break through to the god level with their fused bloodline, which was essentially of the same origin and a first-tier bloodline, some of that bloodline power would undoubtedly help boost Zhang Haoshuan and Appo's own. Zhang Haoshuan went to the front desk to inquire about the situation and returned with some food. Demon Kings got discounts on their purchases. The answer to the question about the hotel and Appo's cultivation rooms was straightforward. Indeed, within the ancestral court, only the hotels under the banner of the White Tiger Demon Emperor offered rooms where one could cultivate divine consciousness, and there were only 6 such White Tiger hotels. The enhancement effect was similar in all of them. This was considered one of the core industries of the White Tiger lineage. As for whether there were better cultivation rooms than the Demon Emperor suites, the answer was naturally yes, but those rooms were not to be found in any hotel. They were in the palaces of the Demon Emperors. Despite the steep prices, the Demon Emperor suites were generally fully booked. After all, few places could aid a great demon king in nurturing their divine consciousness, and to a great demon king, 10 Naturi coins a night was pocket change. Of course, it was also pocket change for the White Tiger Demon Emperor, but with all such rooms in all White Tiger hotels being in use throughout the year, the profits ramped up quite fast. Such an enterprise could only be managed by the might of a demon emperor. So, it could be said that Tang San and his companions were quite fortunate. They had found perhaps not the most luxurious but certainly the best value hotel in the ancestral court. After grabbing a quick bite, Zhang Haoshuan left. With his communicator, he could contact Tang San at any time. As noon approached, Tang San's companions gradually woke up from their cultivation. Surprisingly, it was not Wu Bingji but Dubai who had gained the most. Dubai and Appo's spiritual power had long since reached the 9th order. Cultivating in this room significantly benefited his spiritual power, making him appear exceptionally vibrant. Even Wu Bingji now felt that the room and Appo's cost was justified. It was expensive for a reason. In comparison, their standard and VIP rooms seemed less worthwhile. Can we just keep this room and cancel the others? Wu Bingji asked Tang San. If everyone could cultivate in this one room, 10 Naturi coins a day seemed very worthwhile to him. Tang San replied helplessly, my master already asked. For Demon King and Demon Emperor suites, they must verify the identity of the occupants daily. Without him it's not possible. Let and Appo's wait for him to return from his duties. His thoughts had already soared to the even loftier Demon Emperor suites. The Demon Emperor suite might not actually be better for his companions. The higher level of divine consciousness pressure could be too much, leading to counterproductive effects. However, Tang San was different. His foundation in divine consciousness was deep, surpassing all other mighty beings in this world. Cultivating in such an environment would undoubtedly greatly accelerate the enhancement of his divine consciousness, which was precisely what he needed most now. He had to find a way to enter the Demon Emperor suite for cultivation, even if it meant sneaking in. Of course, this was not an easy task, as he could tell from his mental scans of the hotel. Whenever any cultivation room was activated, the hotel staff would immediately realize it. This meant that even if a Demon Emperor suite happened to be unoccupied, he would be discovered immediately when he sneaked in to cultivate. As for sharing it with other great demon kings, even the thought was laughable. Moreover, given how good the cultivation rooms at this White Tiger Hotel were, who knew how many demon kings and great demon kings were present? If he was discovered, he would be doomed. Thus, although Tang San rarely felt such an intense urge, he had no intention of acting rashly. Before doing anything, he had to put together a proper strategy. It seems he might still need to keep up his mysterious act. As Tang San and Appo's thoughts raced, pondering how to enter the Demon Emperor suite for cultivation, Wu Bingji asked him, where should we start our tour of the palaces? From the nearest to the farthest? Tang San, what do you think? Zhang Haoshuan had left them a map, clearly marked with the locations of each palace belonging to the Demon Emperors and Nymph Emperors. Tang San returned from his thoughts and said, no, that won't do. The sequence is important. Let's start with the Demon Emperors and go from weakest to the strongest. After all, even though they're all at the same tier, they're not all equally strong. If we slowly ramp it up, it'll be easier for us to get used to the pressure and get some enlightenment. Wu Bingji and Appo's eyes lit up. That makes sense. We have 6 days left, and we need to visit at least 2 or 3 palaces each day to finish before we go to the great beast fighting arena. Shall we set off now? Alright, grab something to eat first, and then we and Appo's set off. The first stop. At this point, Tang San and Appo's mind suddenly stirred. He instinctively thought of a former adversary, the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor, who ranked last among the 9 great demon emperors, Didin and Appo's yet have a palace. Thus, first on the list would be the one above him, ranked 8th, the Sword Saint Demon Emperor. Tang San had once faced a red-crowned crane demon, whose swordsmanship had left a lasting impression on him. Cloud-soaring Sword Saint Demon Emperor? Dubai asked. Yes, Tang San confirmed. They searched on the map and quickly found it. It wasn't an Appos, too far from their hotel. Of course, that was only in relative terms. The ancestral court was vast, so walking was impractical, and flying was prohibited, so they had to find transportation. After eating, everyone returned to their rooms to gather their things, then met up in the lobby. Wu Bingji was the first to arrive downstairs. He had already inquired at the front desk. The hotel could provide carriage services, even flying carriages. However, upon hearing the price of the flying carriage, Wu Bingji immediately shook his head and vetoed it. He felt that a regular carriage would suffice. 1 Naturi coin could rent a regular carriage for a day. Wu Bingji truly felt that money seemed to have lost its usual significance ever since arriving at the ancestral court. Meals were charged by the day, costing 1 Naturi coin per person for 3 meals. Soon, a carriage of the White Tiger Hotel was waiting outside for them. The carriage wasn't an Appos, huge, but it could accommodate 5 people. Visiting the Demon Emperor palaces from the hotel was common. The carriage didn't an Appos, need a driver, as the horned horses pulling it possessed a certain level of intelligence. They headed straight for the palace of the Sword Saint Demon Emperor. The Sword Saint and Appos' palace was on the ancestral court and Appos' eastern side. According to the map, the higher the ranking of the demon emperors and nymph emperors, the closer their palaces were to the center of the ancestral court. The very center housed the ancestral court council. The council was on a mountain peak at the very center of the ancestral court, towering into the clouds and perennially shrouded in mist. Of course, it was accessible only to the demon emperors and nymph emperors. Lifting the curtain, they sat in the carriage, watching the scenery flash by on either side of the road. Dubai comfortably placed his hands behind his head and said with a smile, "Being wealthy is great. Riding in a carriage is much more comfortable than walking. Absolutely delightful." Wu Bingji glanced at him. "Would you still want to ride in a carriage if it weren't an Appos, for saving time?" Dubai chuckled. "Senior brother, money comes with earning, not saving. We just need to earn more." Wu Bingji said irritably, "You talk as if you know how to make money." A white light flickered in Dubai and Appos' eyes. "I and Appos, LL cast some good luck on myself. Who knows, I might even find some money later." "Take it back," Tang San said quickly, looking up at Dubai. Dubai, startled, quickly retracted his bloodline power and asked in puzzlement, "What in Appos' wrong?" Tang San explained, "This is the ancestral court, the stronghold of the Celestial Fox clan. The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor can extend its divine consciousness to every corner of this place if it so wishes. Aran and Appos, you afraid of being discovered using your bloodline power, and then being captured by the Celestial Fox clan to be used as a sacrifice?" Dubai and Appos' face changed. "My bad, I won in Appos. To use it anymore." Tang San cautioned him, "Unless I tell you it in Appos, safe to use the Celestial Fox transformation, Dawn and Appos, use it while we and Appos, in the ancestral court. This is for the sake of our safety." Of course, the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor Wuden and Appos, constantly monitor the entire ancestral court with divine consciousness, but given Dubai and Appos' impulsive nature, Tang San was worried he might use the Celestial Fox transformation at an inappropriate time and invite big trouble. Yeah, I and Appos, LL listen to you." Dubai immediately became cautious. For some reason, he felt genuinely scared whenever Tang San got serious. As expected, the ancestral court had excellent security and traffic conditions. The carriage of the White Tiger Hotel could speed along the main roads, and even patrolling enforcers would yield right-of-way when they saw the crest engraved on it, ensuring a smooth journey. They traveled many times faster than walking, and within half an hour, they reached their destination. The carriage stopped near the Sword Saint Palace, and Tang San and his 4 companions got off one by one. Looking up from the foot of the hill, they saw a slope about 300 meters tall, topped by a majestic palace. The palace was extremely tall, towering even. Although the main entrance still resembled a classic palace, the overall structure was a sharp, acute triangular shape, like a sword blade thrusting into the sky, pointing at the heavens. Even from the foot of the hill, one could faintly feel the surging sword aura, as if it were ready to pierce the skies, majestic, but at the same time painfully sharp. Above the Sword Saint Palace there were no storm clouds. It was always clear blue skies and white clouds. Today was cloudy, with most of the ancestral court covered in mist, but sunlight directly hit the triangular Sword Saint Palace. It was quite extraordinary. Cloud soaring indeed. Tang San praised silently in his heart. Not just him, but his companions were also staring at the Sword Saint Palace, and it took them a full 5 minutes before they came back to their senses. Dubai exclaimed, "Wow, that Anapos. That's awesome. I can see massive fortune gathering there. It's soaring into the sky, but for some reason it stays together." Tang San warned him, "Don and Apos. Stare with your spiritual power, or you might get hurt by the sword aura. Let and Apos go up." The hill where the Sword Saint Palace was located had stairs only at the front side. At this moment many people were climbing up. A closer look revealed that regardless of race, none of the climbers was in a rush. In fact, the closer they got to the Sword Saint Palace, the slower their pace became, and the fewer the number of climbers. When the Shrek squad actually stepped on the stairs, they understood why. The moment they stepped on the stairs, a sharp aura descended from the direction of the Sword Saint Palace. And when they looked at the palace, it felt as if the palace itself had transformed into a giant sword slashing down from the sky. It was clearly an illusion, yet it produced a tremendous oppressive force in their hearts. Tang San and Apos' expression remained unchanged. And surprisingly, it was not Wu Bingji who had the highest cultivation, but Dubai who seemed unpressured. The pressure from the Sword Saint Palace was more of a spiritual nature. Dubai did not feel much pressure with his 9th order spiritual cultivation. The other 3 displayed varied expressions, each experiencing different feelings. Cheng Zicheng murmured, "So this is what sharpness is like?" She was an inheritor of the Golden Rock bloodline, and aside from the high-speed flight, the primary feature of the Golden Rock was the sharpness of its feathers. Her wings were her best weapon. She had her own understanding of sharpness to some extent, but upon arriving at the Sword Saint Palace, she now realized her understanding was far from sufficient. Sharpness seemed to have a different meaning here. They climbed step by step, and the higher they went, the greater the pressure was. The sensation of sharpness also became increasingly pronounced. The 5 individuals each had different experiences. Dubai seemed utterly unfazed. Though he felt some pressure, it didn't in Apos' affect his climb much. It just slowed him down slightly compared to his normal pace. Tang San ascended while contemplating, naturally sensing the sharpness. Guli walked up thoughtfully. His understanding wasn't in Apos' profound, but his pace wasn't in Apos' slow. Wu Bingji and Cheng Zicheng, however, lagged behind their teammates, especially Cheng Zicheng. She paused after each step, as if taking in some kind of feeling before continuing. Wu Bingji was also deep in thought. Though his ice nymph transformation wasn't in Apos' directly related to sharpness, the ice element in Apos' lethality relied on freezing, exploding, and sharpness. Thus, the essence of sharpness from the Sword Saint Palace also resonated with him. There were many pilgrims. Here, payment was required not just at the summit but from the moment one began climbing, a surefire way for the demon emperors to amass wealth. Even so, this requirement was perfectly justified. The understanding gained when one's attributes aligned with the demon emperors was more than worth the price. In fact, there were a number of worshippers that stopped at every step and kowtowed before continuing. Tang San looked upward and noticed that very few worshippers actually entered the Sword Saint Palace directly. Some would stop at a certain point and simply cultivate on the spot, only continuing once they fully understood whatever it was that had inspired them. Worshippers from the same clan paid 5 Naturi coins, while those from other clans paid 10 Naturi coins per visit, a considerable amount. However, if the experience truly boosted their cultivation, it was indeed worth it. The ancestral court in Apos' reputation as a pilgrimage site for all demons and nymphs was well earned. The higher they climbed, the stronger the overwhelming sword intent became, though not unbearable. Most intriguingly, the sword intent varied, seemingly displaying different aspects of sharpness. Compared to Dubai and Guli, who showed mild reactions, Chang Zicheng and Wu Bingji clearly gained profound insights from the experience. Tang San himself was also impacted, though not as profoundly. As a former god king, his understanding was no inferior to that of the demon emperors. Yet, the sharpness here effectively refined his spiritual power and subtly polished his divine consciousness, making it feel like his spiritual power was being compressed further. A beneficial development. Although it had only been 1 day since their arrival at the ancestral court, Tang San already deeply felt this place was a treasure. As long as he could cultivate here, his speed of improvement would be unmatched. As Dubai and Guli climbed past the halfway point, their pace eventually slowed, mainly due to the intensifying sword intent. Guli was coping better. Dubai, having the weakest cultivation among them, struggled despite his strong spiritual power, as the sword intent and Apos' oppressive force was overwhelming. Dubai turned to Tang San and said, "I and Apos am having a hard time holding on." Tang San replied, "Then stay here and cultivate. Ignore the sword intent itself and use this pressure to refine your spiritual power. Try to compress and consolidate it as much as you can. Senior brother Gu, you can do the same." Guli nodded, chuckled and said, "I can still go up a bit further." With these words he continued to move forward. Chang Zicheng and Wu Bingji had only climbed less than a third of the way up. Their pace was slow, but their aura was subtly changing. Tang San gave a slight smile and continued to climb. With his cultivation level and spiritual power, this pressure was nowhere near enough to overwhelm him. Jiuli stopped when he reached about 3/4 of the way and sat cross-legged to meditate. Tang San passed him and continued upwards. At this position, the pressure intensified, and the sharpness of the sword intent invisibly struck at the spiritual world. Tang San estimated that anyone with a bloodline and spiritual power below the 9th order Kuden and Apos continue upwards. Although his own cultivation hadn't and Apos reached the 9th order, the combination of his powerful bloodline powers and peak 9th order spiritual power made it trivial for him. Continuing upwards without the company of his companions, Tang San quickened his pace. He faintly felt that, for these demon emperor and nymph emperor palaces, ascending the palaces was also a journey of discovering his own cultivation path. The best results came when facing the aura of a demon emperor and Apos' palace that suited his own bloodline talents. If the attributes didn't and Apos' match, the effect was significantly reduced. The Sword Saint Palace undoubtedly suited Wu Bingji and Chang Zicheng, especially Chang Zicheng. So, it was better for them to train more here rather than having to visit all the palaces. Finding the one that suited oneself was truly the best option. For Tang San himself, his diverse bloodlines naturally made it suitable to visit more palaces to gain insights, reap greater benefits, and better understand this world. Step by step, Tang San was nearly at the summit. As he quickened his pace, his spiritual power, influenced by the sword intent, compressed even more. His divine consciousness was at the core, naturally polishing and merging with the compressed spiritual power. At this moment, it was as if Tang San was using external forces to help transform his spiritual power into divine consciousness. The consumption of spiritual power in this process was immense, but no matter the cost, it was absolutely worth it for him. Transforming spiritual power into divine consciousness usually required gradual cultivation, but now he had been given a chance for transformation. Tang San realized that this was likely also the way for the demon and nymph clans and Apos' 9th order powerhouses to advance to the god level. If one could cultivate in such a place, especially in a demon emperor and Apos' or nymph emperor and Apos' palace that matched one and Apos' attributes, the chances of consolidating divine consciousness and making a breakthrough were much more significant. He just didn't in Apos' know if the demon and nymph clans had to pay any price after such a breakthrough. Finally, Tang San was about to reach the summit, and the Sword Saint Palace grand doors were now right before him. The doors were immense, 15 meters tall, and triangular on top. The double doors were open, and the overwhelming sword intent surged from within. At this moment, aside from Tang San, no one else had reached the summit with him. As he stepped onto the final stair, the pressure did not decrease. Instead, it became even more concentrated. The powerful and sharp aura even made Tang San and Apos' skin tingle with pain, necessitating the activation of the Lion Tiger Golden Astral to defend against it. It must be said, The power of a first-tier bloodline was formidable. Moreover, the assimilative capacity of the lion-tiger golden astral was exceptionally strong, even capable of absorbing some of the sword intent, which in turn sharpened Tang San and Appo's own aura. More precisely, this ability of the lion-tiger golden astral was called assimilation. It took the opponent and Appo's power and assimilated it, adding temporary attributes to one in Appo's bloodline power. This means if the opponent and Appo's ability is sharp, then upon assimilation, the lion-tiger golden astral will also gain a sharp attribute. This aspect is far more formidable than the golden holy fire of the golden lion clan, which can temporarily devour an opponent and Appo's energy but only purely enhances one and Appo's own bloodline power. With the empowerment of the lion-tiger golden astral, Tang San steadied his stance and then continued step by step until he reached the grand doors of the Sword Saint Palace. The sharp sword intent caused his hair to flutter backward as if blown by an invisible wind. The impact of the sword intent on his body sped up the polishing of his spiritual power, while the lion-tiger golden astral quickly assimilated it. It felt as though countless swords were slicing through his body, yet also stimulating it to grow stronger incessantly. Truly a fantastic place. These 10 Naturi coins were well spent. Below the god level, the stronger one in Appo's cultivation, the greater the benefits one can gain here. However, the gains would likely diminish for those above the god level, as this pressure would be less effective on god level powerhouses. Of course, it and Appo's already a great deal whether it and Appo's 5 or 10 Naturi coins. It would likely cost much more if it also significantly boosted god level powerhouses. Tang San stood at the doorway for a while, gradually adjusting to the sharp sensation, before stepping inside. A strange scene occurred. As he stepped into the Sword Saint Palace, the intense pressure that had been present just a moment before suddenly vanished, and his whole body felt empty. Tang San might have stumbled forward if not for his extraordinary self-control. He faltered for half a step but managed to control his form. Tang San took a deep breath. Even such a simple deep breath made Tang San feel like he was inhaling not air, but a torrent of energy from heaven and earth. At that moment, his body seemed to be filled to the brim. Pure life energy entered his body, purifying it. Tang San and Appo's whole body trembled slightly as the previously intensely drained bloodline power quickly replenished, and even his spiritual power, nourished by the dense energy, experienced an indescribable sense of comfort. Subconsciously lifting his head, Tang San felt a thunderous crash as a terrifying thought struck directly into his sea of consciousness. This unparalleled sharpness felt like it would cleave his skull in two, causing Tang San to lose focus in his eyes momentarily. A powerful consciousness emerged in his mind, and a cold voice echoed in his brain. "Would you enter the Sword Saint Palace? Would you submit to me?" The grand voice, laden with overwhelming force and oppression, shivered Tang San and Appo's spiritual power. Such a powerful thought pressed down on him, nearly forcing him to his knees. Tang San didn't and Appo's engage his divine consciousness to resist. Such a fearsome spiritual thought was undoubtedly from the master of the Sword Saint Palace, the Sword Saint Demon Emperor. Perhaps this was merely a fraction of his consciousness left within the palace, but if Tang San were to use his divine consciousness to resist and were discovered, he would be in great trouble. Thus, he desperately used his spiritual power to shield his divine consciousness, preventing the intrusive thought from detecting it. "Would you enter the Sword Saint Palace? Would you submit to me?" The voice rang out again, its oppressive force causing Tang San to stagger. Yet, he forcibly controlled his body, preventing himself from kneeling. Instead, he sat down right there, guarding his mind inwardly, resisting with all his might. "Would you enter the Sword Saint Palace? Would you submit to me?" The voice echoed a third time. This time it felt as if thousands of swords were piercing through Tang San and Appo's sea of consciousness, causing him to groan in pain. Yet, with his peak ninth order spiritual power, he barely managed to endure the agony, gritting his teeth and holding on. Finally, the powerful thought receded like a tide, and Tang San and Appo's sea of consciousness gradually stabilized. All pressure vanished, leaving only the dense vital energy from heaven and earth enveloping him. Tang San slowly opened his eyes. Before him stood a colossal sculpture. The sculpture, about 30 meters tall and humanoid, depicted a man clad in a white robe, holding a black sword. Behind him, a pair of immense white wings spread out as if ready to take flight. No sharp aura emanated from it, but as Tang San looked at the statue, he felt a stinging in his eyes and his spiritual power trembled. Such a powerful aura. Tang San took a deep breath and slowly stood up. Without a doubt, this was the statue of the Sword Saint Demon Emperor. Why one and Oppos? Do you submit? Just then a chilling voice rang out. Unnoticed, a red-crowned crane demon had silently appeared not far in front of Tang San. Tang San and Oppos' heart skipped a beat, for he had no idea how the other had appeared, indicating formidable strength. Although indeed not the Sword Saint Demon Emperor, this was no ordinary demon king. Tang San bowed slightly in greeting and said, "Our attributes are incompatible, so why come here if your attributes are incompatible?" The red-crowned crane demon king asked coldly. Tang San bowed again. "I came to refine my spiritual power." The red-crowned crane demon king and Oppos' gaze softened slightly, sizing him up a few times, and said indifferently, "Your spiritual power is stable, already at its peak. Well-rounded and flawless. Quite rare. If you wish to join the Sword Saint Palace, even as a human you will be valued. You could even attain the rank of Demon King. Why not?" Tang San bowed again and replied, "Because I have not yet found my own true path. I am still in the process of searching. If I find it in the future, I will naturally seek a worthy lord to serve." The red-crowned crane demon king and Oppos' gaze intensified, staring at him. "Interesting. You are one of the most interesting humans I have met. Despite the lowly status of humans, you possess considerable ambition, which is rare. Should you wish to join the Sword Saint Palace in the future, you are welcome to do so anytime. You should know that among the 8 palaces of the Demon Emperors, our Sword Saint Palace is the most free of racial discrimination." He flicked his hand as he spoke, and a small token flew towards Tang San. Tang San quickly caught it. It was a token shaped like a tiny sword, compact yet sharp. Forged from very fine metal, it could even be used as a small dagger. "This is the sword command of my Sword Saint Palace. With this token, should you find yourself in trouble, you can claim to be of the Sword Saint Palace and will be protected. I give you a year to find your path. After a year, if you have not found your way or choose not to join the Sword Saint Palace, you must return this sword command." "Thank you, Senior." Tang San looked at the red-crowned crane demon king before him, somewhat surprised. Was this a bribe to win him over? Were the Demon Emperor palaces now so desperate for talent? "Go," said the red-crowned crane demon king with a sweeping gesture of his hand. A force swept up, propelling Tang San out of the grand gates of the Sword Saint Palace. As the sharp sword intent surrounded him again, Tang San looked once more at the sword command in his hand, tucked it away, and then descended the mountain to find his companions. Having truly visited this Demon Emperor palace, Tang San realized that they could not possibly visit all the surrounding Demon Emperor and Nymph Emperor palaces before the start of the Great Beast Fighting Arena. Just one palace would likely take a day to explore. Wu Bingji and Cheng Zicheng were only halfway up, meditating and resting in place. Dubai and Guli hadn't an Oppos' moved, both honing their spiritual power. Although Guli had climbed high, his body was now trembling, seemingly on the verge of collapse, clearly due to an excessive expenditure of spiritual power and nearing his limit. On the other hand, Dubai could hold out a bit longer. Tang San moved to Guli and Oppos' side, standing in front of him to shield him from most of the sharp aura. Guli exhaled deeply, opening his eyes. "Incredible, truly incredible." Tang San said, "Senior brother, you and Oppos' exhausted quite a bit of energy. Let and Oppos' head back down to the carriage to rest and recover." "Okay." Guli stood up and led the way down the mountain. Tang San did not leave. He continued to refine his spiritual power while watching over his companions. Dubai persevered an hour longer than Guli, ended his meditation, and then descended the mountain as well. Cheng Zicheng reached the spot where Dubai had been and held out for another half an hour. However, her insights were clearly not just about refining spiritual power, as she was utterly exhausted when she came down. Wu Bingji made it to about 3/4 of the way, enduring another hour longer than Cheng Zicheng before he could no longer keep up. Under Tang San and Oppos' protection, they both descended together. When everyone regrouped at the carriage, the sky had completely darkened. Exhausted, the group couldn't and Apos possibly visit another emperor and Apos' palace. They returned directly to the hotel, ate something simple, and each returned to their rooms to cultivate and reflect on the day and Apos' gains. Despite their physical exhaustion, their gains were significantly substantial, especially for Tang Jia and Wu Bingji, who both gained a new understanding of sharpness. Tang San and Apos' own gains were not small either. They involved compressing spiritual power and refining divine consciousness. Of course, there was also the sword command. After a conversation with Zhang Haoshuan, Tang San learned that for these emperor palaces, those who could enter were beings capable of achieving godhood. Any demon king-level powerhouse was worth recruiting. One could choose to join the palace or not, but if one were to break through to the god level either upon entering or just before entering, they would certainly receive the palace and Apos' protection to help them achieve godhood. This assistance, of course, was not without strings. Once a breakthrough to the god level was successful, one had received great benefits. There would be no more choice but to submit to that emperor and Apos' palace and become part of it. Otherwise, one and Apos' divine consciousness would be destroyed before they were allowed to leave. Previously, Zhang Haoshuan had not expected anyone from their group to enter an emperor and Apos' palace, so he had not explained these details. Yet unexpectedly, Tang San had entered the first palace they visited. Different emperor palaces exert different kinds of pressures. Being able to enter one does not necessarily mean one could enter another. Even for god-level powerhouses, this required compatibility in attributes and also a certain amount of fate. Thus, being able to step through the gates of an emperor and Apos' palace was akin to passing its test. Tang San, unaware of these nuances, had simply walked in and was immediately enveloped by the will of the Sword Saint Demon Emperor. This piqued Tang San and Apos' interest. If he were to enter other emperor palaces, could he also receive protective tokens? And was it better to have as many of these tokens as possible? He posed this question to Zhang Haoshuan, who surprisingly confirmed this was true. Before breaking through to god level, the more emperor palaces recognized him, the more resources he would receive and the more he would be valued if he chose to join one of them. It was said that a Dragon Clan powerhouse had once gained the favor of 8 emperor palaces, becoming a key figure for cultivation. He joined the Crystal Palace and, although he could not become the heir to the Crystal Demon Emperor, he became the chief steward of the Crystal Palace with the cultivation of a peak demon king. It was rumored that if he could break through to the Demon Emperor tier, he might inherit the Crystal Palace should the Crystal Demon Emperor fall. Since then, all the grand palaces have highly valued those who could gain recognition from multiple emperor palaces, sometimes even receiving early investments. Receiving the sword command from the Sword Saint Palace was an investment in Tang San. With sufficient information, Tang San thought carefully, and an idea swiftly formed in his mind. As a human, to accomplish more, one indeed needs considerable strength, especially when facing the entire realm. 12th order powerhouses are formidable beings within the realm. If one and Apos' breakthrough could garner sufficient support from beings of such stature, even the realm and Apos' master would have to reconsider their stance. The path through the emperor palaces seemed increasingly viable. The only concern was his identity as a human. If he could gain widespread recognition from numerous emperor palaces, could they overlook his human status and support his eventual breakthrough? This was uncertain, but it wasn't an Apos' entirely impossible either. Much would depend on how he managed the situation. The journey through the emperor palaces must continue, and so must his companions and Apos'. However, they would have to adopt different approaches. By leveraging his connections and proving his worth within the emperor palaces, Tang San could potentially build a coalition powerful enough to challenge even the greatest authorities of the realm, transcending the usual limitations humans face. The night passed without a word. The following day, Tang San gathered his companions in his room. Chang Zicheng, Wu Bingji, Gu Li, and Du Bai all looked radiant, especially Chang Zicheng, whose beautiful eyes sparkled with irrepressible joy. Tang San smiled and said, "Sister Zicheng, it looks like you and Apos' had quite a fruitful experience." Chang Zicheng replied, "Yes. I never expected sharpness to feel." The experience was truly amazing. Tang-san, I don't really want to visit any other palaces. Can I just keep going to the Sword Saint Palace? I feel that it suits me best. Tang-san nodded and said, yes, I noticed that yesterday. Different palaces are suitable for different bloodline abilities. And if I and Appos am not mistaken, the stronger the bloodline, the more benefits you can get. Sister Zicheng, the Sword Saint Palace seems particularly suitable for you. You must also visit the Undying Demon Emperor and Appos' palace in the future. The Golden Rock is a powerful bird demon, but the Phoenix is the king of birds. You and Appos will surely gain some insights at the palace of a Phoenix Demon Emperor, so you should focus on the Sword Saint Palace and the Undying Palace. Before we join the team battle, just visit these two palaces. After finishing, he looked at Wu Bingji and said, Senior brother, the sharpness of the Sword Saint Palace will be very beneficial for your ice-based attacks. You can start training there with Sister Chang. Also, there is another palace you must visit. The Endless Palace of the Universe-Flooding Endless Nymph Emperor. Water and ice share the same origin, and since your bloodline comes from a nymph, you should gain significant insights there. What about me? Gu Li hurriedly asked. Tang-san pondered for a moment, then said, Brother Gu, there really ISN and Appos. A palace that fits your time attribute, it and Appos, S2 special. If I were to suggest, in this case you should go to the strongest one. The Crystal Demon Emperor is said to be omnipotent, and since omnipotence should include time as well. Plus, the oppressive force of the Crystal Palace will surpass all others. It's the most suitable even if you just want to refine your spiritual power there. So I suggest you go only to the Crystal Palace. Dubai said with a grin, so I and Appos am just going to the Celestial Fox Palace then? Tang-san nodded. Exactly. I and Appos will accompany you to the Celestial Fox Palace to avoid any issues. Remember, even if you have deeper insights, do not go up more than 50% of the steps. I and Appos am concerned that you might not control it and expose your bloodline. Okay, I and Appos will follow your lead. Dubai nodded repeatedly. Wu Bingji said, so, do we go our separate ways starting today? Tang-san said, let the carriage take us to each location. Eldest brother, you and Sister Chang head to the Sword Saint Palace and stay there for the next 2 days. After that, you can move to the other 2 palaces. I and Appos will accompany Brother Dubai directly to the Celestial Fox Palace. Brother Gu, you go to the Crystal Palace. We and Appos will move separately. Wu Bingji then distributed some money to everyone, saying with a hint of pain, ever since we arrived at the Ancestral Court, we and Appos have really been spending money like water. Tang-san smiled and said, but we aren't wasting it, are we? Don't worry. My master still has plenty of money. The amount we and Appos have spent now is just a drop in a bucket. The 5 of them ate breakfast together and then set off again, this time splitting up. Wu Bingji and Chang Zicheng were the first to be dropped off as they returned to the Sword Saint Palace. With their experience from yesterday, they knew the way well, and Tang-san had nothing to worry about. Next, they stopped at the Crystal Palace, located in the core area of the Ancestral Court, just like the Celestial Fox Palace. These 2 demon emperors ranked first and third in the Ancestral Court, so their palaces were naturally situated in the most central area. Before Gu Li exited the carriage, Tang-san repeatedly cautioned him not to be reckless. The Crystal Palace, being the first palace, was the most formidable, and he needed to be especially careful. Gu Li naturally agreed, setting off with excitement and nervousness. The last stop for the carriage was finally the Celestial Fox Palace. Before getting out of the carriage, Dubai clutched Tang-san and Appos' sleeve and asked, Little Tang, do you think I and Appos will be discovered? The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor is a master of fate. Do you think he might sense my arrival and capture me straight away? Tang-san patted his shoulder and reassured him, you Don and Appos need to worry about that. To someone of the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor and Appos' caliber, you and Appos nothing more than an ant. Even if he does sense something different about you, he one and Appos care. Trust me, he and Appos not that bored. He has to oversee the entire Ancestral Court. But even so, Don and Appos randomly reveal your Celestial Fox transformation, and Don and Appos climb more than half the steps. The chances of being discovered are very slim if you do that. Plus, I and Appos am right here with you. Let and Appos go. As he spoke, he pulled Dubai out of the carriage. The moment they got out, both of them felt a slight tremor. Tang San suppressed it right away. Dubai and Appos, however, kept shuddering. Almost trembling even. The peak in front of them was significantly taller than the Sword Saint Palace, rising over 500 meters. The mountain was entirely white, though it was unclear what material it was made from. A subtle, invisible aura spread quietly through the air around it, carrying with it a hint of allure and an indescribable, mysterious sensation that lingered in the atmosphere. Tang San and Appos' expression turned solemn as he sensed the force of destiny, a dense power of fortune. Looking back at the distance, everything around seemed to diminish in significance. Tang San held on to Dubai, not letting him move forward, and they stood still, silently taking in the atmosphere. Tang San's expression then transitioned from curiosity to awe as he gazed at the celestial fox sacred mountain before them. He realized what material the white mountain was made of. Yes, this was destiny. It was not some kind of special earth or even rare ore. It was the condensation of fortune. If this material had a name, it would have to be fortune stone. How could such a thing exist? Even with Tang San and Appos' experience through 3 lifetimes and once being a god king, he had never seen such a phenomenon. What kind of being was the celestial fox demon emperor? A true master of fate who could channel the power of fortune into substance. Indeed, the celestial fox demon emperors and Appos' lineage must have consolidated the entire Phelan planet and Appos' fortune here, presiding over the ancestral court, blessing both demon and nymph clans. No wonder that on Phelan planet only the demons and nymphs were so powerful, to the extent that they could even rival the divine realms. It turned out that they had concentrated the entire planet in Appos' fortune here, blessing both the demon and nymph clans. Given such circumstances, with the energy-rich Phelan planet as the source of spiritual fortune, how could the demons and nymphs not be powerful? Indeed, the celestial fox sacred mountain before them could be considered the true heart of the demon and nymph clans. Tang San even speculated that the celestial fox demon emperor might be able to communicate directly with the will of the planar ruler. Without the aid and consent of the planar ruler, how could it be possible to concentrate a planet and Appos' fortune to such an extent? Even Tang San couldn't and Appos' help but feel a deep respect for the lineage of the celestial fox demon emperor. It was incredibly powerful, could only be described as miraculous. No wonder other races couldn't and Appos' rise or threaten the dominance of the demons and nymphs. Without the blessing of fortune, they naturally couldn't and Appos' manage. Tang San even wondered if the celestial fox demon emperor might be in fact the planar ruler. Planar rulers could exist in various forms. Some might only possess instinct without concrete thoughts, while others could cultivate their own consciousness. If the celestial fox demon emperor was indeed the planar ruler, and it was personally bestowing blessings on the demons and nymphs and fostering their growth to drive the evolution of the plane, a lot of things would make sense. Of course, it wasn't approach didn't come with its own issues, the most significant being the excessive concentration of fortune, which led to an imbalance in the planet and Appos' development. Indeed, from a long-term perspective, this was not conducive to the evolution of the planet and Appos' civilization. Of course, this was just how Tang San saw it, from the perspective of someone who had ruled over a divine realm. However, this method was undoubtedly the best for the demon and nymph races, ensuring their prosperity and longevity. Tang San realized he had a new task: to determine the exact nature of the relationship between the celestial fox demon emperor and the planar ruler. At the same time, if humans were to rise truly, then the mountain before him, celestial fox sacred mountain, had to be destroyed. Only by dispersing the fortune to every corner of the planet would humans have a chance to ascend. In other words, he was destined to stand against the celestial fox demon emperor. Little Tang, are we still going? Dubai asked, still shivering. His feelings differed from Tang San and Appos'. To him, celestial fox sacred mountain seemed like the embodiment of the celestial fox demon emperor himself, and his bloodline was drawn toward it, as if ready to burst forth at any moment. It felt like there was nowhere to hide. Of course, let and Appos' go. As he spoke, Tang San placed his hand on Dubai and Appos' shoulder, and Dubai felt a warm current flow from Tang San and Appos' hand into his body. Instantly, his restless bloodline seemed to be soothed and quickly calmed down. The trembling within him also noticeably vanished. He breathed a sigh of relief and looked surprised at Tang San before relaxing and following him toward Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain. Upon reaching the mountain base, they looked up at the Celestial Fox Palace. They found that the number of people ascending Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain was more than 10 times greater than those climbing Sword Saint Mound. The steps of Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain were nearly filled with demons and nymphs. Seeing this, Dubai immediately felt relieved. The large number gave him a sense of safety. There were many auras mixed there, so it was much more difficult to pinpoint a single one. He understood that Tang San was right. With his level of cultivation, he wasn't Appos, significant enough to attract the attention of the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor. They had to queue to pay, simply because there were too many demons and nymphs climbing. The steps were so crowded that even as wide as they were, they could hardly contain the climbers. The Celestial Fox clansmen were hard at work, controlling the flow of climbers. Suddenly realizing something, Dubai Kuden and Appos, helped but asked Tang San how much profit are they making. Tang San blinked in confusion, but when he looked at the stairs, they were about 50 meters wide and 500 meters long. They were nearly packed in the lower half and the crowd was only thinning out toward the top. Even calculating at a rate of 5 Naturi coins per climber, the sum was simply astronomical. With a meaningful look in his eyes, Tang San said, "It and Appos, different here. Coming here ISN and Appos, necessarily about an increase in cultivation level. It's about being blessed by fortune. If there's any good investment, that's it." The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor was a master of destiny, a controller of fate. Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain itself was forged from what Tang San called Fortune Stone, containing the densest fortune power on the whole of Phelan planet. Here, without a doubt, was the best place to enhance one and Appos' own fortune. Being imbued with this fortune made any endeavor more successful for anyone. After paying 10 Naturi coins each, they finally queued up to go up the stairs. Dubai and Tang San exchanged a look, and Tang San patted his shoulder again before stepping upon Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain. As they took their first step and climbed the first flight of stairs, both of them shivered simultaneously. Dubai felt like he had entered another world. An incomparable sensation of wonder filled his heart, intoxicating him. His bloodline power flowed naturally, and his Celestial Fox transformation was about to activate directly. He could even feel 3 foxtails about to burst forth from his body. Just then, Tang San and Appos' grip on his shoulder suddenly tightened, and a warm current flowed in again, accompanied by a sharp sensation within his sea of consciousness. Dubai was startled and quickly snapped out of it, turning to see a purple-golden light shimmering in Tang San and Appos' eyes. Instantly, cold sweat broke out on his back, soaking his clothes. That was close. If it hadn't been for Tang San, he would have been exposed. Tang San and Appos' voice echoed in his mind. "Have you been training your spiritual power? Use it to envelop your bloodline power. Don and Appos, let your bloodline and Appos' aura directly absorb the aura of Celestial Fox Palace. Keep them separate." After arriving at Celestial Fox Palace, Dubai realized that he had forgotten the basic countermeasures Tang San had taught him the day before. Hurriedly, he gathered his spiritual power to cover his entire body, instantly isolating the pleasant aura. Tang San finally released his shoulder. Focus and perceive the aura here. Tang San had long since set up a spiritual barrier within himself, enveloping the discerning eye of heaven and preventing any contact with the fortune aura. This fortune aura originated from below, rising upward from the fortune stone. Pure fortune from the very core of the planet. The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor was truly formidable, and indeed overwhelmingly powerful. It was hard to imagine how such a feat had been achieved. This was undoubtedly great news for the demon and nymph clans, as it formed the basis for their rule over the world. However, it was a different story for the entirety of Phelan planet. The fact that such a massive amount of fortune was concentrated here affected other races, including those inhabiting the vastly larger ocean, causing them to develop more slowly. Such imbalanced development would produce side effects that would be more and more pronounced as the planet evolved. Indeed, the demon and nymph races had grown stronger over countless years, even reaching the level where they could touch the divine realm. However, for a plane to evolve into a divine realm, it was not enough for just a few races to reach this level. More crucial was the evolution of the plane itself, and the mark of that evolution was the birth of a child of the plane. When this child of the plane grew to the level of a god king, it would be the moment for this plane to evolve into a divine realm. Although the Phelan planet was powerful, evolving into a divine realm still seemed challenging. And as Tang San was now finding out, the strength of the demon and nymph races came from forcibly aggregating fortune, and such unfairness had impacted the planet and Appo's balance. Could the celestial fox demon emperor achieve this? No, it was unlikely that this was the result of one single being's powers. It had probably been done by those demon ancestors and nymph ancestors with great powers. Of course, while the rising fortune beneath Tang San's feet impacted the plane as a whole, it also greatly benefited Tang San. This immersion in fortune affected all his senses and even aided his overall fate. However, this was merely a boost in fortune and likely wouldn't Appo's last long. It was sufficient for those demons and nymphs who came to be imbued with fortune, but it was somewhat lacking for Tang San and Dubai, who had the celestial fox bloodline. There would be a certain purifying effect on their bloodline, but for this alone to cause evolution was just not possible. Senior brother Dubai, you must learn how to utilize the power of fortune here. Feel the various changes of fortune. With his eyes closed, Dubai slowly climbed upward, following Tang San, quietly sensing the changes in the surrounding fortune. The light of the purple demon eyes flickered in Tang San and Appo's eyes. Here, he dared not use the discerning eye of heaven, lest his possession of the celestial fox transformation be discovered. Using his purple demon eyes, Tang San gazed upward at the celestial fox sacred mountain, where it seemed a beam of light shot straight into the heavens. This pale luminescence spread outward in expanding halos that remained distinct and unblended, brightening everything they touched. This was an augmentation of fortune for the entire demon continent. This is really grand. Tang San marveled inwardly as he silently continued following Dubai upward. The higher they climbed, the stronger the fluctuations of fortune became. Tang San noticed that among the climbing demons and nymphs, those higher up showed increasingly visible joy on their faces. Those with weaker spiritual power quickly succumbed to this joy. Once their self-awareness was completely lost, people from the Celestial Fox Palace would take them down via side paths. Losing mental control meant they could no longer stay here, or they might succumb to spiritual decline. Tang San and Dubai climbed slowly but steadily. Both possessed ninth-order spiritual power, so they weren't in any danger. After resolving the initial issues, even Dubai was not easily swayed. As they climbed, the potent fortune intensified around them, enriching their vital energy and causing their eyes to brighten. Everything seemed to be improving. This feeling was truly wonderful. There were over 2,000 steps, for an overall height of 500 meters. After climbing more than a quarter of them, a faint auspicious cloud appeared. With each step they climbed, this cloud became more pronounced. Tang San silently absorbed the streams of fortune, sensing the changes between them. At the same time, he quietly observed the celestial fox sacred mountain beneath his feet. This is like an infinite flow of fortune. It in Appo's enormous. The higher he climbed, the more confident he became that the concentration of fortune in the mountains beneath him must be connected to the planar ruler. Whether the planar ruler was sentient or not, it should have instinctively felt that this method of concentrating fortune was not entirely beneficial for the plane and Appo's growth. What did this mean? It likely meant that the ancestral court controlled the planar ruler, thus allowing the demon and nymph clans to grow stronger and rule this place perpetually. In other words, the barrier between the 9th and 10th orders was not set by the planar ruler but by the ancestral court. Zhang Haoshuan's bloodline wasn't Appo's particularly strong, so when he broke through, he wasn't Appo's severely challenged by the ancestral court. But it was different for Tang San. Once he was on the verge of a breakthrough, as long as the demon and nymph clans controlled the planar ruler, they could likely act against him, disrupting his breakthrough. At this thought, Tang San had a sudden idea. Assuming the planar ruler was an intelligent entity under the control of the ancestral court, it would make sense for it to want freedom. In that case, could it be persuaded to help Tang San conceal his presence and allow him to become a god? As an outsider god king, His divine consciousness could not be hidden during his ascension to the god level and would surely be detected, especially by the planar ruler. The first instinct upon sensing an outsider god king would be fear that he might overrun the entire plane, which could be a greater calamity than any posed by the demon and nymph clans. There was no way he would not be targeted. But even if that was the case, the current state of the Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain made Tang San think of a possible opportunity. If the plane were entirely under the planar ruler's control, negotiating terms for his ascension would be exceedingly tricky. However, if the planar ruler had lost some freedom and authority, perhaps there was a chance to persuade it. With this thought, Tang San deeply felt that his visit to the ancestral court and the climb of the Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain had not been in vain, as they had revealed an avenue he might exploit. A smile unconsciously formed at the corners of his mouth. Just then, Tang San felt a sudden pain in his waist and turned his head to look beside him. He saw that it was Dubai who had pinched his waist. "What are you doing?" Tang San asked, annoyed. Dubai blinked. "I saw that mysterious smile on your face and was afraid you were getting lost in it." Don and Appos. T worry I one and Appos T. Let and Appos. Speed up. There are too many demons and nymphs around here. The power of fortune here ISN and Appos. T enough to give you enough insight, Tang San said as he climbed faster with Dubai. Since there were so many climbers, their quiet acceleration went unnoticed. They didn't and Appos. T slow until they surpassed 1/3 of the steps. Those who made it this far were all strong-willed. More importantly, reaching this point also meant their cultivation was formidable. The power of fortune had become thicker here, and due to the fortune stone just as pure. This pure force of fortune swirled around their bodies, stimulating their bloodlines. Was that really all it was? The Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain felt great, significantly enhancing fortune. However, in a sense, the Celestial Fox Sacred Mountain was the most powerful entity in the ancestral court. Was climbing it just for an enhancement of fortune? The insights wherein and Appos, T entirely clear were they? At the Sword Saint Sacred Mountain, the climbing process was continuously sprinkled with a sharp essence from the Sword Saint Palace, which strongly stimulated those cultivating similar abilities and led to insights. Yet here it was merely an augmentation of fortune. Indeed, for most demons and nymphs, perhaps the mere augmentation of fortune was all they hoped for. However, for those who truly needed enlightenment, this would and Appos. T be enough, would it? While pondering this, Tang San continued to climb upward with Dubai. The power of fortune grew denser, and Dubai and Appos' climbing speed noticeably began to slow, and at about 40% of the way he finally stopped. Little Tang I and Appos, am afraid I can and Appos. T maintain my spiritual strength if we go higher. Tang San didn't and Appos. T force him saying then stay here and cultivate. Stay alert. Otherwise you might expose yourself and that could be fatal. Yeah, Don and Appos T worry. Dubai nodded firmly. If my spiritual power fails I and Appos, LL go down on my own. I one and Appos T force it. Alright then I and Appos, LL continue up to see more. Tang San told Dubai to stay put and meditate, absorbing the power of fortune. Although this power couldn't and Appos, T directly affect Dubai and Appos' bloodline now, he could absorb it and combine it with his own bloodline once they returned to the hotel. Leaving Dubai behind, Tang San continued climbing. His pace significantly quickened NWO that he didn't need to pay attention to Dubai. Both had 9th order spiritual power, but Tang San and Appos' was stronger than Dubai and Appos'. Not only was he at the peak of the 9th order, but he had compressed it multiple times and he had a spirit core backed by his divine consciousness, so he wasn't and Appos' T worried about losing his will here. Quickly, he reached the halfway point of the Celestial Fox Mountain and Appos' steps. Here the fortune was even denser, so much so that the scenery before him had become blurred. Surrounded by thick fog, the auspicious clouds above even started to emit a faint golden hue. Was there a slight dampness emanating from these clouds, a rain of fortune? Such nourishment from the fortune made Tang San feel comfortable in every limb. Even his skin became more lustrous. Unlike the Sword Saint Palace, not losing oneself while climbing to this point required a solid foundation of 9th order spiritual power. The Celestial Fox Mountain didn't and Appos' T demanded much physical cultivation and posed little pressure in that regard, but it required considerable spiritual power. What lay ahead remained uncertain. While pondering, Tang San took a step forward. At that moment he suddenly shivered, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. As soon as he took that step, the auspicious clouds above him suddenly vanished, or rather, they changed color. What was once pristine white turned pitch black. Things were longer auspicious. Now an ominous sensation descended upon him. Tang San possessed the discerning eye of heaven, and cultivated the celestial fox vision to the sixth order with Dubai. He naturally understanding what this meant. This was the descent of misfortune. Indeed, it was no longer fortune but misfortune. The fortune stone beneath his feet seemed to vanish in an instant. All that remained was misfortune. Tang San took a deep breath, immediately stabilizing his body and standing still. Having previously absorbed a substantial amount of fortune power, these energies immediately began to contend with the external misfortune as it descended. It was an exceedingly bizarre sensation, as if everything around him started to spin wildly, everything becoming unclear. He'd previously noticed that climbers were exceedingly rare starting halfway up. No wonder this was the case. Tang San had assumed that the scarcity of climbers had something to do with the 50% mark, and there was something peculiar about it. Now he realized that he'd been right. The lower part of the mountain was indeed nothing more than a pure blessing of fortune. The upper part, however, was the true test of the celestial fox sacred mountain, and the real opportunity as well. The confrontation between fortune and misfortune felt bizarre and confusing to the average bloodline bearer. However, it was different for Tang San, who possessed the celestial fox vision. Insights kept emerging in his mind, instantaneously enhancing his understanding of fortune and misfortune. This is great. Dubai should really cultivate here. It would really help him master his own abilities and truly understand his bloodline. As he mulled this over, Tang San slowly lifted his foot. His movements were slow yet exceedingly stable, maintaining his spiritual power within. His body radiated a platinum-colored halo from the lion-tiger golden astral, and with every move he made, he was as firm as a mountain. Be it fortune or misfortune, I am now invulnerable to all. With a solid step, he moved on to the next stair. Instantly, the fortune around him shifted again, and the intense misfortune that had been present simply dissipated, making everything seem clearer. The auspicious clouds gathered once more. A new world with every step? A jolt struck Tang San in Appo's heart. He understood that the celestial fox demon emperor might be even more powerful than he had imagined. One step brought misfortune, and the next brought fortune. Such shifts gave a sense of relief. However, the fortune seemed to split apart soon after, as if a force was pulling him, urging him to continue forward. Tang San took a steady step forward. Suddenly, everything around him turned pitch black, so dark he couldn't see his own hands, much less what lay ahead. In that instant, it felt as though countless dreadful misfortunes descended, launching a frenzied assault directly at his sea of consciousness. Tang San focused inwardly. At such times, the simplest way to counter such assaults was to unleash the discerning eye of heaven to alter his fortune directly, but he obviously couldn't do that. It would instantly expose him. The lion-tiger golden astral on Tang San ignited again, its platinum light flaring intensely. The thick black mist assaulting him was forcefully melted and devoured by the lion-tiger golden astral. Instantly, the platinum bloodline imprint of the lion-tiger golden astral within Tang San was covered with a layer of dark mist. The assimilation property of the lion-tiger golden astral was truly potent. It had even temporarily assimilated the misfortune around him. However, Tang San also felt that this misfortune needed to be released quickly, lest it subtly affect him over time. While thinking, the lion-tiger golden astral suddenly intensified, bursting into flames. It presented a bizarre scene. The inner layer was platinum, but there was an outer layer that burned with black flames, releasing puffs of black mist. If this were during a battle, the lion-tiger golden astral unleashed by Tang San would not only demonstrate formidable power, but could also transfer misfortune directly to an opponent. This was the power of assimilation, and it was no wonder Tang San considered the fused lion-tiger bloodline to be a true first-tier bloodline. Even the lion-tiger clan hadn't T fully grasped the robust attributes of the lion-tiger golden astral, yet Tang San was increasingly realizing its ingenious uses. If it could assimilate even fortune, what couldn't and oppose it do? Ah! He let out a light exclamation, but then calmed down again. Tang San took another step forward as the lion-tiger golden astral burned around him. The surrounding darkness suddenly exploded, as if all the misfortune had been dispelled in that moment. Fortune descended once more, with vast amounts of fortune power gathering above Tang San and Appo's head into a rain of golden light, washing away the remnants of misfortune and bringing him the aura of fortune again. However, at this moment, a strange glint flickered in Tang San and Appo's eyes. His lion-tiger golden astral was still blazing fiercely, yet the descending fortune power remained utterly unaffected and was not assimilated. This meant that the lion-tiger golden astral could only assimilate misfortune from the celestial fox vision, not fortune. Did this mean that the assimilation ability could only assimilate powers that would affect him negatively? Or was it because the celestial fox transformation itself was powerful even among first-tier bloodlines and the lion-tiger bloodline could not entirely suppress it? Both possibilities were likely. But without a doubt, the misfortune-devouring power of the lion-tiger golden astral was already sufficient to allow Tang San to stand firm here. Tang San let the rain of fortune soak his body, only moving upward again as the rain began to abate. With each step he took, the fortune underwent drastic changes, and countless illusions appeared around him. But no matter what changes or illusions occurred, for Tang San, there was only the lion-tiger golden astral. A powerful first-tier bloodline combined with peak ninth-order spiritual power made each of his steps appear incredibly stable. His pace was not fast, but he moved steadily forward, step by step, toward the celestial fox palace. Tang San knew he was definitely being watched. But this was exactly what he wanted. After passing through the Sword Saint Palace yesterday, he decided to follow his teacher and Appo's advice and gain favor from as many palaces as possible, which would benefit his upcoming plans. The demon and nymph clans were so powerful that even with his foundation as a former god king, he couldn't and Appo's oppose them before regaining his divinity. Thus, he first needed to integrate into one of these clans to disrupt the status quo. And since he had decided to join a demon clan, and right now this was preparation. The more favor he received now, the greater his influence when he eventually joined. As for which demon clan he would join, he had naturally already made his choice. The moment he first stepped into Kali City and saw that girl selling milk tea, everything was destined. She wanted to become the next Peacock Great Demon King and maybe even the Peacock Demon Emperor, and of course he would be by her side. Forever. Everything he was doing now was in preparation for her return. Step by step, he ascended. The fortune around him was undergoing bizarre changes, yet he always maintained control. Complete misfortune was followed by fortune. Illusions and shifts abounded. Yet through all these changes, Tang San remained constant. As solid as a rock, as stable as Mount Tai. 1. He devoured the misfortune as it came, and accepted the fortune when it arrived. Tang San didn't and Appo's know how long he had been walking, but the sky had already darkened when he reached the top of the mountain and stepped onto the last stair. He had been climbing since morning, which meant it had taken him a full day to climb just 500 meters. A golden rain of light bathed his body, nourishing his sea of consciousness. At that moment, everything seemed to become beautiful. Tang San stood in front of the celestial fox palace, but he had no intention of going inside. Upon reaching this place, all the pressure had disappeared. This meant that he had passed the celestial fox palace and Appo's test. Without using the discerning eye of heaven or any other abilities, he had relied solely on the strength of his lion-tiger golden astral to reach the mountain peak. Only 2 of the 6 bloodline abilities within him could genuinely help him reach the celestial fox palace: the discerning eye of heaven and lion-tiger golden astral. Even the space manipulation of the peacock transformation couldn't and Appo's achieve this. At this moment, Tang San still had no intention of going inside. He had encountered the Sword Saint Palace yesterday, where the Sword Saint Demon Emperor was ranked 8th among the 9 Demon Emperors. The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor was ranked 2nd. The gap was bound to be vast, and the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor and Appo's spiritual power was likely the strongest in the ancestral court. If he truly caught the interest of the celestial fox demon emperor, Tang San didn't and oppose. T believed that with his current abilities, he could completely conceal his divine consciousness from this demon emperor and Appo's gaze. Especially since this demon emperor was the master of fate. What if it discovered that Tang San's fate was beyond its control? Therefore he stopped here. The reason he didn't and oppose T leave immediately was that he was waiting for something. Sure enough, after he had stood for about a minute, the light rain above his head gradually faded, and a gentle voice followed, "Why aren't and oppose? T you coming in?" Tang San looked in the direction of the voice. At some point, a woman had appeared not far from him. She looked to be in her 30s and she was incredibly beautiful with a gentle smile. The most striking feature was the 7 large foxtails standing upright behind her, gently swaying. Each tail was about 5 meters long and shimmered with a faint silver light, making it appear extraordinarily magnificent as it moved. Tang San and Appo's heart trembled. 7 tails meant she was a celestial fox demon king. She gave him a completely different feeling from ordinary demon kings. He bowed slightly and said, "Because I might not be suited for the celestial fox palace." The woman smiled and said, "How do you know you and Appo's? Not suited if you don and Appo's T try? Under the blessing of the demon emperor, you might find you are suitable." Tang San smiled bitterly and said, "That and Appo's exactly what I and Appo's am worried about. I and Appo's am afraid I might be unable to stay true to myself and lose my way. If that happens, all the hardships I endured to gain my mutated bloodline would be in vain." The celestial fox demon king smiled slightly. "Your bloodline is very interesting. It and Appo's a completely new bloodline that even I have never seen before, and it has the potential to be first tier. Do you think the celestial fox palace is unworthy of you? You should understand that reaching this point is already your limit as a human. To move forward, you need the favor of fate." Tang San intentionally displayed a proud expression. "The celestial fox palace has always been a place I and Appo's yearned for. However, if I am to join the celestial fox palace, it must be after I become a demon king. Otherwise, I feel I am not qualified. I hope my achievements will not rely on fortune but on my efforts. Only in this way will I be worthy of becoming a member of the celestial fox palace." The celestial fox demon king chuckled. "You are an interesting human. No wonder you made it this far. You are the first human to pique my interest." Tang San smiled bitterly, "But I still don and Appo's dare to step into the celestial fox palace." The celestial fox demon king said, "The fact that you're able to restrain yourself and stay true to your heart makes me regard you more highly. Go now, and when you are ready, come back here. Whether you can become a member of the celestial fox palace depends on whether you can turn your pride into reality." She waved her hand as she spoke, and a beam of white light shot toward Tang San. He hurriedly raised his hand to catch it. It felt warm to the touch. It looked like high-quality jade, perfectly round and pure white, with what seemed like smoke flowing inside. A piece of fortune stone. The celestial fox demon king had vanished at some point, leaving only her voice echoing in the air. "When you return, bring this with you. Also, wearing it will help you." The second token was in hand. Tang San gripped the fortune stone, his gaze calm and resolute. Everything he said to the celestial fox demon king was naturally a pretense. He didn't and Appo's hide his mutated bloodline because she would have seen through it. The platinum-colored lion-tiger golden astral had never appeared in this world before. The ability to absorb misfortune and transform it into his power was what the celestial fox palace valued. That was why he had been given this token. It was a shame that he had encountered this 7-tailed celestial fox in the palace. If he had met her somewhere far from the ancestral court, he could have taken her blood. Then maybe his and Dubai and Appo's celestial fox transformation could have reached 7 tails. As long as he didn't and Appo's mind exhausting his divine consciousness, Tang San was confident he could defeat a 7-tailed celestial fox. However, he had to admit one thing. The celestial fox clan was indeed beautiful. Ahem, Meigongzi, Meigongzi, Meigongzi. Tang San silently repeated Meigongzi and Appo's name 3 times in his heart, and his mind immediately cleared. Without lingering any longer, Tang San turned and descended the mountain. When he reached the spot where Dubai had been cultivating earlier, Dubai was already gone. When he reached the mountain base, Tang San found the carriage still waiting for him. As soon as they saw him, the carriage door opened, and his companions jumped out. Dubai couldn't and Appos. Help but say I thought. As he began speaking, Wu Bingji stopped him and waved to Tang San. Let and Appos get on the carriage first. The five of them got back into the carriage. Seeing the fatigue and relief on his companions and Appos' faces, Tang San understood that they had been waiting here after finishing their climb, worrying about him all the while. His heart warmed at the thought. Little Tang, how did it go? How far did you climb? Why are you only coming down now? I couldn't and Appos. Hold on past noon, Dubai finally asked. Tang San extended his right hand and opened his palm. Immediately, a gentle wave of fortune emanated from the fortune stone. This is Wu Bingji and Appos' pupils contracted, and then he exclaimed, the celestial fox palace and Appos' token? Did you reach the top? Tang San nodded. I got lucky and reached the peak. But I didn't and Appos' enter the celestial fox palace. I was worried about attracting the celestial fox demon emperor and Appos' attention, but they still gave me this token. They said I could join the celestial fox palace after I and Appos' decided. That and Appos' amazing, Cheng Zicheng praised. Eldest brother and I gave it our all today, and only managed to climb about 60% of the way. Getting a token seems impossible for us this time around. Tang San said, Don and Appos' be discouraged. All the palace tests are designed for peak 9th order powerhouses. You need to be at the peak of the 9th order and have a strong bloodline to have a chance at getting a token. I was just lucky, and my spiritual power is already at the peak of the 9th order, so I managed to get these 2 tokens. Stop explaining yourself, you're making it worse, Guli said, rubbing his forehead. Senior brother Guli, how did it go at the Crystal Palace? That and Appos' the first palace? Tang San asked him. Guli and Appos' expression was strange. Don and Appos' mention it. It seemed like I was the only one trying to climb the mountain at the Crystal Palace today. When I paid, the guy collecting the money looked at me with pity. I didn't and Appos' understand at first, but when I started climbing I got it. 3 steps. I took all of 3 damn steps and then it was over. 10 Naturi coins just like that. 3 steps? Is it that hard? Tang San said in surprise. Guli smiled bitterly. The first step felt like nothing. On the second step, I felt like I had entered a bizarre world. Everything around me turned into a crystal world, sparkling and extraordinarily beautiful. When I stepped onto the third step, I met myself. Tang San and Appos' heart tightened. You met yourself? Guli nodded. Yes, there was another one of me, and everything I could do, he could do too. Then he attacked me just like I would. Sadly, because it was so sudden, I couldn't and Appos' win. I was defeated. When I woke up, I had already been knocked down. The person collecting fees said I and Appos' have to pay again if I wanted to try again. It and Appos' a total ripoff. Tang San frowned slightly. The Crystal Demon Emperor was known as the Omnipotent due to its bloodline ability, which apparently allowed it to replicate all other abilities. What were this ability's limitations? The third step essentially created a replica of Guli. The implication seemed to be if you can and Appos' even defeat yourself, what right do you have to climb my crystal sacred mountain? That was likely the case. It was genuinely mysterious. Since arriving at the ancestral court, the 5 members of the Shrek squad had their eyes opened. Everything was so peculiar. Guli looked pitifully at Tang San. Tang San, what should I do? Why couldn't an Appos' you defeat an opponent with the same abilities as you? Have you thought about it? Guli was stunned for a moment. Well, he was very familiar with my abilities and seemed to use them even better than I did. Tang San smiled slightly and nodded. Exactly. He had the same abilities as you but used them better. Can an Appos' you learn from that? Even if you couldn't an Appos' win couldn't an Appos' you have lasted longer? The more you do it, the more familiar you become with your abilities and the better you can apply them. Time is supreme. Even the abilities of a first-tier bloodline can't compare to yours. Senior brother Gu, you need to work harder. How about this? Tomorrow I and Appos' I'll go with you to experience the mysteries of the Crystal Palace. Great. If you come with me, that would be wonderful. Guli was overjoyed. Just like Dubai and the others, he now also saw Tang San as the team's anchor. What about me? Dubai looked at Tang San pitifully. Tang San glanced at him and said, Senior brother Du, you will continue. Remember, when you climb to the halfway point, at the first step past the halfway mark, you and Oppos, LL encounter a backlash of misfortune, and the next step you'll get fortune again. You should train on these 2 steps to help you master your control of fortune. You can and Oppos, T go any higher than that. With your cultivation level you can and Oppos, T handle it. Okay. Dubai felt a bit down. Without Tang San accompanying him, he always felt uneasy. Tang San looked at Wu Bingji and said, Eldest brother, tomorrow you and Sister Zicheng should continue at the Sword Saint Palace. The day after, we and Oppos, LL switch locations. Wu Bingji sighed, it feels like time is running out. I and Oppos, D love to stay here longer if we had enough money and time. Training in the ancestral court is so much faster than in Cali City. It and Oppos, a completely different world. Now I understand why you insisted on getting us noble status and bringing us here. Tang San chuckled helplessly. How could that be my idea? I didn't know anything about the ancestral court. All of that came from my master. Let and Oppos, work hard together. As for long-term training here, it and Oppos, not impossible, but right now it's not the best idea. Once we gain some insights, we should go back and digest them and then come back later. Don and Oppos, T worry about the money, eldest brother. I have a way to handle it. Wu Bingji laughed. Yes, having money sure makes things easier. Although they spent many Naturi coins each day to train at the palaces, he genuinely believed it was worth it after 2 days. This refining process immensely benefited their future attempts to reach God level. Compared to the laziness of most noble demons and nymphs, diligence was one of humanity and Oppos' strengths. They simply didn't and Oppos' know what fatigue was. The carriage moved smoothly along the street. After briefly discussing their training experiences, everyone closed their eyes to rest. A day of climbing, training, enduring pressure, and gaining insights had taken a toll on them. But it was all worth it. Coming to the ancestral court had truly opened the door to this world for them. Tang San held the fortune stone, silently feeling the abundant fortune power within it. He pondered and reflected on everything he had encountered in the ancestral court. These experiences were especially significant to him, providing great insights that helped him figure out a direction for his future. After returning to the hotel and eating a simple meal, they returned to their rooms to rest. Tang San returned to his room, his mind still filled with the changes in fortune he had sensed today. Although he hadn't an Oppos, used the discerning eye of heaven throughout the process, he remembered the myriad transformations of fortune. Moreover, he still had a lot of the power of fortune stored within him. Now that he was back, there was no need to worry about being sensed by the celestial fox demon emperor. He went to the training room and lifted the seal on his discerning eye of heaven. Instantly, the discerning eye of heaven seemed to sense something, and the power of fortune accumulated within him began to surge violently. The imprint of the discerning eye of heaven suddenly brightened, transforming into a white vortex that voraciously absorbed the massive power of fortune into itself. Tang San and Oppos' celestial fox transformation was now at the 6th order, just like Dubai's, and his manifestation also had 3 tails. At this moment, under the influence of the discerning eye of heaven and Oppos' fortune absorption, he felt his bloodline imprint improving. His perception of fortune seemed to be subtly increasing as well. Without a doubt, fortune was one of the most challenging abilities to master, even for the Celestial Fox clan. However, with a literal mountain of fortune in the ancestral court, cultivating and controlling fortune for the Celestial Fox clan was unquestionably much easier. At the same time, after experiencing today in Oppos' climb, Tang San also realized that he had been right to warn Dubai about the backlash. It was clear as daylight. The deeper one cultivated the power of fortune, the greater the backlash of misfortune. Thus, the higher the advancement, the more difficult it became for the Celestial Fox clan. If not careful, they could fall victim to misfortune, especially considering that the Celestial Fox clan had little combat ability to speak of. The more fortune was used, the more misfortune accumulated, and if that misfortune was not released every now and then, it could well end up causing a calamity. Thinking of this, Tang San and Appo's pupils contracted sharply as he realized a crucial issue. Throughout many generations of celestial fox demon emperors, they had almost gathered all the fortune of the entire Phelan planet in the ancestral court, forming the celestial fox sacred mountain. With that, the demons and nymphs received all the blessings of the planet. If they gathered so much fortune power here that it actually solidified into a literal mountain, it means they manipulated fortune to a ridiculous extent. In which case, there has to be an equal amount of misfortune produced, and that misfortune is where? When the celestial foxes gathered the planet's fortune here, what did they do with the misfortune? Was it spread across the entire planet, or was it stored somewhere? Undoubtedly, whoever obtained this entire fortune would be the first to suffer when the misfortune erupted. Thinking of this, even his heart Kuden and Appo's helped but race. He seemed to have found something that could genuinely threaten the rule of the demons and nymphs. Taking a deep breath, Tang San let his emotions gradually calm down. With his current abilities, it was evident that he couldn't and Appo's interfere with these matters yet. Only by becoming stronger first would he have the right to reach for these things. He had already obtained the tokens from 2 sacred mountains. Next were the others. Tomorrow he would visit the Crystal Palace. Guli and Appo's encounter today had piqued Tang San and Appo's interest. As the strongest in the entire ancestral court and even the whole demon continent, what kind of wonders could the Crystal Demon Emperor bring? Tang San also wanted to see what would happen if he was replicated. Would all of his abilities be copied or just a part? Few climbers have climbed the Crystal Sacred Mountain, but if one could genuinely ascend it and arrive before the Crystal Palace, what kind of token would they receive? Thinking of this, he had already decided to take a trip to the Crystal Sacred Mountain tomorrow and see his own reflection. He focused his thoughts, gradually meditating, digesting the day and Appo's gains and restoring his spiritual power. Whether it was the Sword Saint Palace or the Celestial Fox Palace, the 2 days of climbing had been most beneficial for his spiritual power. Spiritual power nurtured his divine consciousness, the most crucial aspect of all Tang San and Appo's cultivation. Only when his divine consciousness was truly strong would it become his trump card, allowing him to summon the power from his previous life when necessary. Although he had only been in the ancestral court for a few days, Tang San already felt that this trip was worthwhile. Everything he saw, heard, and experienced gave him a deeper understanding of this world and brought him many benefits. It seemed that he indeed needed to stay a bit longer this time. As the first ray of sunlight fell into the room from outside in the morning, Tang San woke up gradually in the cultivation chamber. His mind was serene, and everything seemed so incredible. The divine consciousness at the core of his spiritual power seemed to become more refined, and all his spiritual power was denser and more solid. If a powerful individual could see his sea of consciousness at this moment, they would find that the spiritual power had completely transformed into a viscous liquid, several times denser than ordinary spiritual power. His sea of consciousness had also become wider, with ample space for more. In terms of intensity, his spiritual power was still at the peak of the 9th order, but in total amount it surpassed the combined spiritual power of 3 peak 9th order practitioners. Such immense spiritual power naturally provided better nourishment for his divine consciousness. Even though the conversion efficiency might be no more than 1 in 10,000, Tang San was still pleased with it. After breakfast, his companions were all in high spirits. The past few days of climbing had indeed been wonderful, despite spending a bit more money. On their next departure, Wu Bingji and Chang Zicheng still went to the Sword Saint Palace, while Dubai could only go to the Celestial Fox Palace. This time, however, Tang San and Guli got off the carriage in front of the Crystal Sacred Mountain of the Crystal Palace. The carriage sped away, taking Dubai to the Celestial Fox Palace. Tang San looked up, gazing at the number 1 palace in the entire ancestral court. The Crystal Sacred Mountain where the Crystal Palace was located was very tall, seemingly even taller than the Celestial Fox Palace. Clouds and mist hidden the upper part of the towering peak, making the actual Crystal Palace invisible. Therefore, the real Crystal Palace could not be seen either. The mountain had a hazy beauty, with a special kind of misty radiance that exuded a faint glow. This glow was mysteriously diffused into the air, impossible to see through no matter how one looked. It was filled with a sense of mystery. Guli was also looking at the crystal sacred mountain before him, his expression somewhat complex. To be honest, his gains yesterday were the least. He inexplicably lost and was eliminated, wasting 10 Naturi coins just like that. At least, in his view, it was a waste, so he had been pondering all night how he could defeat a replica of himself. If he couldn't and Appos to even defeat himself, how could he continue forward? Let and Appos, go, Tang San and Appos, voice said beside him. Guli quickly followed him. When the two arrived before the crystal sacred mountain, guards naturally stopped them and collected the fee. As Tang San paid, he even felt a hint of pity in the guards and Appos' eyes. Just then, a male who seemed to be from the Tiger Demon clan walked out with a look of frustration. His expression and eyes revealed that his previous climb had not been pleasant, but this only made Tang San more curious about the crystal sacred mountain. He asked the guard, "Is it just as difficult for a Demon King level expert to climb the mountain?" The guard replied coldly, "According to the rules, all sacred mountains are the same. Demon Kings and above are not allowed to climb." Don and Appos, do you even know this basic fact? Tang San honestly didn't and Appos to know this. Upon hearing it, he said, "I see. We and Appos, from out of town and just arrived, so we were and Appos, aware. Thanks for the information. Go on in," the guard said, not saying much more as he stepped aside. Tang San and Guli had to pay 20 Naturi coins to enter. At this moment, Guli was already gritting his teeth, clearly determined to beat himself no matter what. Senior brother Guli, relax a bit. Since the opponent you face has all the same abilities as you, their weaknesses will naturally be the same too. I think you should start from that angle. Only you truly understand yourself. While your mirror image may have the same abilities and might even use them more perfectly, it and Appos' still not you. It can and Appos' have as much insight. Hearing Tang San and Appos' words, Guli and Appos' eyes lit up. I think I get it now. Little Tang, you go ahead and start climbing. I and Appos' I'll stay here and think for a bit. I feel like I and Appos' figured something out. He was naturally intelligent. Otherwise, he wouldn't and Appos' have grasped the mysteries of time. After Tang San and Appos' reminder, he had clearly caught on to something. Tang San smiled and nodded, then naturally stepped forward. Soon he arrived at the front of the crystal sacred mountain. Up close, the hazy, misty feeling gradually disappeared, revealing stairs carved like crystal. They were magnificent, and the refracted light from the crystal stairs was dazzling and mesmerizing. Tang San naturally wouldn't and Appos' be disturbed by the light. Focusing his mind inward, he stepped forward, already ascending the first step. At that moment, his body suddenly trembled. Tang San clearly felt an inexplicable force approaching his body. No, using the term invade was somewhat inaccurate. This strange energy didn't and Appos' bring him any pain or impact. Describing it as a scan might be more appropriate. Tang San smiled slightly. The blue-silver emperor and Appos' imprint radiated brilliantly in his dantian. Under his deliberate stimulation, the blue-silver emperor and Appos' brilliance covered his entire dantian, overshadowing the light from the other imprints. Then he took the second step, stepping onto the second level of the staircase. This time, an invisible energy descended from above. It was a mental force wanting to penetrate his sea of consciousness directly. Tang San guarded his mind internally, causing his sea of consciousness to spin violently under his control. It emitted the aura of a peak 9th order spiritual power, yet he prevented the energy from truly entering his sea of consciousness. Then he took the third step, ascending the step that had blocked Guli and Appos' path yesterday. In that instant, his body seemed to become transparent, giving him a feeling of complete exposure. Immediately after, the surrounding scenery underwent a dramatic transformation. Tang San found himself in a unique space. The ground was made of sparkling crystal, and in the distance, everything seemed to fade into nothingness, making it appear that this space was boundless. Looking down, he saw his own shadow on the crystal floor. Then he watched as the shadow slid away into the distance, moving several tens of meters before suddenly standing upright, appearing right in front of Tang San. The shadow on the ground vanished. Replication. This must be another of the omnipotent crystal demon emperor and Appo's signature moves. Knowing it and Appo's a replica yet unable to counter, it was likely where the crystal demon emperor and Appo's strength lies. The Tang San opposite him had a gleam in his eyes, locking his gaze on the real Tang San. The next moment, vines surged from his body, rapidly growing and rushing towards Tang San. Tang San himself also released vines quickly, but instead of entangling Tang San, they coiled around, forming layers of barriers. Soon Tang San and Appo's vines reached swiftly with sharp thorns protruding from the taut vines. A faint mist spread indicating poison, and as the vines trembled, many tiny seeds drifted silently, sweeping toward Tang San. These were all abilities that Tang San had bestowed upon the Blue-Silver Emperor through continuous evolution. Tang San stood still, unaffected, as the vines around him spun violently, forming a vortex. His controlled vines immediately swept aside any vine approaching him, and the airflow generated by the vortex prevented any seeds from coming close. At the same time, the Blue-Silver Emperor released by Tang San also scattered seeds, spreading towards the Tang San opposite him. The Blue-Silver Emperor vines around Tang San also started spinning, mirroring Tang San and Appo's technique exactly, dispersing the seeds. A replica that can learn? A smile appeared on Tang San and Appo's lips, his eyes revealing immense confidence. Can learn, huh? Then let an Appo's see how well it can learn from me. Vines suddenly shot up, rapidly rushing towards Tang San. Tang San also released vines, aiming to pierce the real Tang San. But at that moment, the vines Tang San released twisted together mid-air, forming a gigantic spear. The spear itself glowed with a brilliant blue light, and in the next instant, its speed surged, transforming into a lightning bolt aimed directly at the replica. The replica was stunned momentarily, its surrounding vines rising to block the attack. But just then, vines suddenly sprouted from its feet, forming a cage and trapping it in place. With a puff, the giant spear pierced the replica and Appo's chest. The replica froze momentarily, then turned into a shadow, flowing back to Tang San and Appo's feet. The vines retracted, and everything around him returned to normal. Tang San saw himself standing on the third step of the staircase. At that moment, another person appeared beside him, Guli. Guli, standing on the third step, trembled slightly. He was clearly in an illusion, likely battling his own replica. Tang San could trounce his replica because the replica could replicate his abilities but not his memories. The Blue-Silver Emperor was one of the most powerful abilities in his previous life, having defeated countless opponents. In Douluo Continent, the Blue-Silver Emperor had powerful skills known as spirit abilities. In this world, the spirit rings from Douluo Continent were gone, but Tang San could still activate the same abilities of the Blue-Silver Emperor. So the replica had just faced Tang San's fourth spirit ability, Blue-Silver Prison, and the fifth spirit ability, Blue-Silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, from his previous life. With both spirit abilities unleashed simultaneously, how could a replica that only had the basic abilities and instincts of the Blue-Silver Emperor withstand them? These Warren and Appo's bloodline talents but skills at Kuden and Appo's replicate through scanning. Tang San stepped forward again, ascending the fourth step. The scanning sensation returned even stronger this time, as if determined to see through him. The Blue-Silver Emperor and Appo's imprint radiated brilliantly, covering his entire body. This Blue-Silver Emperor was an Appo's a plant native to this world but had evolved through Tang San and Appo's repeated absorption of other plants. It had many characteristics, but its true power lay in Tang San and Appo's control. He continued to the fifth step and the mental scan reappeared. However, with Tang San and Appo's spiritual power concentrated inward, the scan could probe but not penetrate. At the sixth step, the scenery changed again, returning to the previous illusion. Like before, the shadow flowed into the distance and reformed into the replica. This time, the replica immediately waved its hand toward Tang San, releasing the Blue-Silver Prison, attempting to control him. However, Tang San had already used the Ghost Shadow Perplexing track, dodging just before the blue-silver prison could rise. The replica and Appo's hand formed the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, and its aura locked onto Tang San instantly. Tang San raised his hand towards the replica, and a bunch of vines scattered, forming a large net in the air, diverting the thrusting blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear off course. At the same time, another large net enveloped the replica as it recoiled from releasing the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear. This replica and Appo's learning ability was indeed strong. It had learned the abilities Tang San had previously used, making him face a stronger version of himself. Tang San had begun to understand some of the trials of the Crystal Sacred Mountain. When ordinary demon and nymph clans came here, their bloodlines and innate abilities were scanned and immediately replicated. Then they had to face an opponent with all their abilities but who used them even better. Thus, most powerful beings likely Kuden and Appo's get past the third step. To defeat a replicated version of oneself meant having a deeper understanding of one and Appo's bloodline power, developing abilities that Kuden and Appo's be easily replicated. Or like Tang San advised Guli, using one and Appo's own weaknesses to overcome the enemy. However, after one failure and continuing to climb, one would face a version of oneself that had resolved the previous battle and Appo's issues, becoming stronger and more perfect. One failure for the replica was a growth opportunity. Such a trial was undoubtedly challenging. To continue climbing, one had to defeat the replica. To defeat the replica, one needed abilities that Kuden and Appo's be easily copied, or the ability to identify and exploit one and Appo's own weaknesses. However, everything one did would be learned by the replica, to be faced again with the next replica. The Crystal Sacred Mountain had over 1,000 steps, which was why there were hardly any climbers who could continuously face increasingly perfect and stronger versions of themselves. Tang San, however, could do it. For him, as long as he didn't and Appo's reveal his abilities, the Crystal Sacred Mountain could only replicate what he wanted it to. That large net was the third spirit ability of the Blue-Silver Emperor from Tang San and Appo's previous life, Spider Web Restraint. 2 prepared Spider Web Restraints, combined with Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, allowed him to defeat the second replica again. Continuing upward, Tang San climbed to the 9th step. The third replica had already mastered the step of the Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track that Tang San used to dodge, as well as Spider Web Restraint, Blue-Silver Prison, and Blue-Silver Emperor Tyrant Spear. With the same abilities, Tang San was intimately familiar with himself. With his God King level perfect control, how could he lose even if the abilities were the same? However, he didn't and Appo's want to waste too much time, so he used something else. Controlling Crane Catching Dragon. A supreme Tang Sect technique, Controlling Crane Catching Dragon. Controlling Crane Catching Dragon might not deflect an overpowering attack like the Blue-Silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, but it had no problem deflecting Spider Web Restraint. He closed in using Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, completely outmatching the replica and Appo's use of the same technique. Once close, the battle was over. 3 consecutive wins. After 3 victories, the scenery before Tang San suddenly changed. When he reappeared on Crystal Sacred Mountain, he was surprised to find that he was no longer on the original 9th step but halfway up the mountain. Guli was somewhat blurry in the distance. So it wasn't an Appo's about facing hundreds of replicas one after the other? That made sense. Otherwise, with continuous evolution and replication, each battle would consume physical energy and bloodline power. The climber would be exhausted to death, making it impossible to pass the test. It seemed the number of trials was limited. The first 3 must have been the introductory tests. On the surface, the Crystal Palace and Appo's trials didn't and Appo's benefit the examinees, but that was really just on the surface. In fact, the benefits from the Crystal Palace were likely greater than those from other palaces. The trials provided self-reflection. By constantly battling oneself, finding and solving personal issues, and continually breaking through and improving, it was undoubtedly excellent training for the strong. Of course, losing once meant losing 10 Naturi coins, so it was also excellent training for the rich. Tang San could even guess that when the Crystal Palace first introduced this test, many strong individuals attempted it, and the palace must have made a lot of money. But later, people realized it was too costly. Not everyone could defeat themselves in just 1 or 2 tries. Some likely couldn't and oppose to even defeat their first replica after dozens or even hundreds of attempts. After all, most demon and nymph clans had only one bloodline, with obvious abilities and talents. Defeating a version of oneself that could use said abilities better was no easy task. Tang San silently felt the changes in the surrounding aura. He found that the changes in the spiritual energy were most noticeable halfway up the mountain. The spiritual energy around him had become noticeably fuller and was extremely pure, without any specific attributes. This energy could be directly converted into bloodline power. Clearly, this was meant for the examinees to recover and rest. Tang San hadn't an oppose. He expended much energy, so without pausing for too long, he stepped onto the next level of the staircase. This time there was no scanning sensation. However, Tang San suddenly felt some pressure. He continued upward, and after he climbed 3 more steps, the scenery changed again. He was shifted back to the previous crystal illusion. The shadow at Tang San and Appo's feet detached and slid into the distance. However, Tang San and Appo's pupils immediately contracted. The shadow split into 3, forming 3 figures in front of him. Yes, this time there were 3 replicas of Tang San. Is this how the difficulty increases? This is cheating. It and Appo's a geometric increase in difficulty. Facing 3 of yourself in this unique isolated space. How could an ordinary demon or nymph overcome such a challenge? While Tang San was internally shocked, the 3 replicas had already launched their attack. A spider web restraint came straight at Tang San, while a blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear was being formed. Even more terrifying, numerous blue-silver Emperor vines frantically sprouted from the ground, covering a 100-meter area with Tang San at the center. Blue-silver thrust. Tang San had used this before. However, with 3 replicas deploying it simultaneously, the coverage area was larger, and the power naturally greater, sealing all escape routes. You guys are good, Tang San murmured. 1 against 3, if he only had the blue-silver Emperor, then even with superior techniques, defeating these 3 replicas wouldn't and Appo's be easy, and he might fail. The most terrifying aspect of these replicas was their timing and their mastery of using abilities. Their cooperation was flawless, not merely a simple release of skills. Unfortunately for them, they were facing more than just the blue-silver Emperor in him. When Tang San arrived at the Crystal Palace, he was prepared to reveal at least 2 bloodlines. Though rare, having 2 bloodlines was not unheard of. Mei Gongzi, for example, had 2 bloodlines, and they were both first tier at that. Thinking of this, Tang San wondered what would happen if Mei Gongzi and Appo's White Tiger transformation and his own Lion Tiger transformation were combined. This thought flashed through Tang San and Appo's mind, and at the same time incandescent flames surged up around him. Whether it was the blue-silver thrust or the approaching spider web restraint, both turned to ashes instantly. Tang San and Appo's right hand reached out and caught the lightning-fast blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, which also quickly burned. The massive strength granted by the Lion Tiger transformation made it impossible for the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear to break through his defenses. Then Tang San moved, using Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track along with the Lion Tiger Golden Astral. He was unstoppable. Half a minute later, the 3 replicas had turned back into shadows, returning to Tang San. This time, after the shadows returned, Tang San clearly felt that he had gained some new insights. The experiences from the 3 shadows during their battle had deepened his understanding of the blue-silver Emperor. This could be considered cheating. Using the first-tier Lion Tiger bloodline, he had forcibly defeated the 3 replicas. Otherwise, if it had been blue-silver Emperor against blue-silver Emperor, the experience would have been more profound. Of course, he would have been very likely to fail. Standing still for a moment, he pondered on these new insights. When he stepped onto the stairs again, a powerful scanning force instantly descended upon him, as if trying to peel him apart and examine every cell. The Lion Tiger Golden Astral burned fiercely, covering everything, even the blue-silver Emperor and Appo's imprint. The powerful first-tier bloodline was scanned. This time the scanning took noticeably longer. From the previous battle, Tang San realized that during the fight, the replicas could directly learn his techniques for controlling his bloodline abilities. However, they couldn't and Appo's T learned the bloodline power itself during the fight. So when Tang San suddenly used the Lion Tiger Golden Astral, the 3 replicas from the previous round couldn't and oppose. T learned it. But it was clear that in the next round, he would face the abilities of the Lion Tiger Transformation and the Blue Silver Emperor. The Lion Tiger Golden Astral, being a first-tier bloodline power, would be much harder to deal with. Tang San could have used the Golden Rock Transformation or the Chrono Croc Transformation to defeat the 3 replicas. However, he had already used the Lion Tiger Golden Astral in the Sword Saint Palace and the Celestial Fox Palace. He couldn't and oppose. T revealed too much. Who knew if these palaces shared information? 2 bloodlines might be considered acceptable, but 3 or 4 would likely lead to him being caught and used as a research sample. So, Tang San chose the Lion Tiger Transformation. He felt that the Crystal Palace and Oppo's actual test Wooden and Oppo's T have too many rounds. Facing 3 replicas was already an insurmountable challenge under normal circumstances. If the tests got any harder, who could handle them? Since it was a test, there had to be some chance of passing. Finally, the scan ended, and his sluggish body could move again. When Tang San stepped onto the stairs again, he was once more transported to the crystal battlefield. 3 shadows flowed out from his feet and solidified in the distance. This time Tang San didn't and oppose. T wait for the 3 shadows to finish condensing. He moved first. Without a doubt, this round he would be facing 3 replicas that had both the Lion Tiger Transformation and the Blue Silver Emperor and Oppo's abilities. He couldn't and oppose. T afford to be as composed as before and reveal the bare minimum of his abilities. He had to seize the initiative that it took about 2 seconds for the 3 shadows to separate from beneath him, condense in the distance and join the battle. 2 seconds wasn't an oppose. T long, but it was not short either, and Tang San knew all too well that he needed to use every advantage to win such a battle. The time it took for the shadows to change was worth exploiting. He hadn't utilized it before because he had no need. The advice he had given Guli about exploiting weaknesses was just for Guli. But this time was different. Tang San used Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, and the Lion Tiger Golden Astral suddenly burst out, emitting dazzling platinum flames behind him, propelling him almost instantly to the shadow in the middle. He was moving at full speed, and he was actually slightly faster than the shadow and Oppo's flow. The energy of the mysterious heaven technique frantically circulated within him. His left hand condensed the Blue-Silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, and his right hand threw a spider web restraint toward the 2 figures forming on either side. At the same time, his eyes emitted platinum light. The moment the shadow condensed into a replica, behind him due to how fast he moved, he abruptly stopped and turned around, slamming his shoulder into the replica's back. The central shadow seemed to sense the danger. The moment it condensed, its Lion Tiger Golden Astral began to burn. However, Tang San was already prepared and attacked with intent, so this strike landed square. With a muffled bang, the platinum flames on the central replica were instantly dispersed, and its back caved in. Tang San and Oppo's right hand held straight like a blade thrust forward. Using Lion Tiger Golden Astral against Lion Tiger Golden Astral, he broke through the opponent and Oppo's protective energy and reached its spine. Then he bent his fingers at the first knuckle and, using the recoil of the initial stab, surged forward again, striking the replica and Oppo's spine. He then used the recoil once more to quickly form a fist, delivering a final punch to the same spot. These 3 consecutive strikes were completed in a flash. Through previous observations, Tang San realized that these replicas could immediately replicate bloodline abilities and, to some extent, combat experience. They also rearranged these abilities to make the replicated bloodline abilities more powerful. However, combat techniques could only be replicated after Tang San had used them. Clearly, skills that required prior training Waren and Oppo's is easily copied. In addition, the replicas could learn Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track but couldn't and Oppo's use it properly without having learned the Mysterious Heaven Technique. The Mysterious Heaven Technique couldn't and Oppo's be replicated because it wasn't an Oppo's a bloodline ability and was hidden very deep anyway. Similarly, controlling Crane Catching Dragon couldn't and Oppo's be replicated. Tang San and Oppo's instant burst of inch force was a subskill also based on the Mysterious Heaven Technique. Even though he had lost the power of his past life, he was still a grandmaster of close combat. With experience from 3 lifetimes, his practical combat knowledge was immense. With a crack, Tang San and Appo's punch instantly broke the central replica and Appo's spine. Tang San didn't and Appo's pause for a moment. He didn't and Appo's bother with the replica burning away the spider web restraint with its lion-tiger golden astral. Instead, he flashed toward the replica that had just shattered his blue-silver Emperor Tyrant spear. Another blue-silver Emperor Tyrant spear condensed in his hand. Tang San took a deep breath, and his entire body seemed to swell up. The spear in his hand was immediately covered in brilliant platinum flames. Hundreds of spear lights suddenly blossomed, shining brilliantly in the air like a dazzling platinum rain. This replica clearly didn't and Appo's know how to respond. It also burned with lion-tiger golden astral, and the blue-silver emperor turned into a large net covering Tang San. At the same time, it was also condensing a blue-silver emperor tyrant spear in its hand. But how could it deal with the countless spear lights so easily? Wherever the spear lights went, the spider web restraint turned to dust almost instantly. More terrifyingly, the countless spear lights suddenly converged into one, with all the platinum light focusing into a single point, piercing through the air. The replica and Appo's blue-silver emperor tyrant spear found the precise spot, and the 2 spears clashed almost instantaneously. The replica and Appo's blue-silver emperor tyrant spear shattered instantly. Although it had also infused its spear with lion-tiger golden astral, how could it compare to Tang San, who combined physical power, bloodline power and spiritual power, and used a proper spear technique to blend them into a seamless whole? This technique was fury of the masses. The spear pierced through the replica's chest, and Tang San's lion-tiger golden astral burned fiercely, devouring the replica and Appo's energy to strengthen itself. The platinum color in Tang San and Appo's eyes seemed to overflow under the influence of this devouring. At that moment, a piercing scream came from behind him. Even without looking back, Tang San knew what was coming. He used Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, twisting his body deftly in midair. At the same time, his physical power, bloodline power, and spiritual power once more fused completely. As he twisted his body, platinum light burst from his eyes, and the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant spear in his hand seemed to become transparent. The platinum spear light flashed and disappeared like lightning, carrying all of Tang San and Appo's power, vanishing almost as if it teleported. The last replica froze in midair. Its hands were not just broken but shattered. Yes, it had grabbed the spear, but the spear was unstoppable. Spear technique. All or nothing. A self-sacrificial spear technique that fused one and Appo's essence, energy, and spirit into a single unreserved strike, with complete disregard of the consequences. This spear strike represented the pinnacle of Tang San and Appo's current offensive power, even stronger than fury of the masses. To execute this technique at such a high speed required immense foundation, experience, and mastery. Otherwise, it would take significant time to build the necessary power. Tang San staggered slightly before steadying himself, but he couldn't and Appo's hide the smile on his lips. He had done it. This was the first time since coming to this world that he had indeed used some of the combat techniques from his previous life in battle. And his opponent was himself, of all people. With his intelligence, he naturally knew how to exploit the replica's weaknesses. The techniques he brought from his past life Waren and Appo's something the replicas could quickly learn. He had realized from the get-go that Crystal Sacred Mountain and Appo's replication ability was limited. It couldn't and Appo's perfectly replicate every detail. Such a perfect replication ability didn't and Appo's exist even in the true God realm. The 3 shadows rejoined and merged with Tang San, transmitting an even stronger sense of experience into his sea of consciousness. The various sensations the 3 replicas felt while facing him were also part of it. The scenery in front of him was once more that of Crystal Sacred Mountain, but Tang San was once more surprised to see that he was no longer halfway up the mountain. Instead, he had reached a position near the summit. Ahead, there was heavy fog, but he could vaguely see the outline of a majestic palace. But in front of Tang San there were still 3 steps left, the final 3 steps. At the beginning of the climb, he faced one replica of himself 3 times. Halfway up, he faced 3 replicas of himself twice. There were 3 steps left, which naturally meant his test wasn't Apos T over, but it was nearing its end. However, Tang San and Apos S expression turned somewhat grim because he realized something. He didn't and Apos T hurried to climb but sat down where he was, quietly recovering his energy. Although his bloodline power seemed barely depleted after the battle, his mind was indeed drained. To face what was likely the final test, he needed to be in his best condition. After experiencing 3 rounds of 1 replica and 2 rounds of 3 replicas, the Crystal Palace and Apos S test wasn't Apos T over yet. What did this mean? Tang San was neither an idiot nor bad at math. This last test would be just 1 more round since only 3 steps remained, that much was clear. So, how many replicas would there be? The second round had 3 times the number of the first round. If the third round also had 3 times the number of the second round, Tang San realized he was likely in trouble and couldn't and Apos T help but think sarcastically, I'm sure a whole lot of normal demons and nymphs can pass this test. Facing 3 replicas, he could still seize every opportunity available, but how could he cope if the replicas became 9 and all his bloodline abilities were copied? Tang San felt helpless. No matter what he did, he would lose. Either he went through with it and was forced to reveal some real power in order to pass the test, or he gave up and lost the possible reward. He was genuinely hesitant. The Crystal Demon Emperor was the first emperor, the head of the ancestral court, and the most powerful being among all demon and nymph races. It had existed for over 2,000 years and Tang San was ultimately human. If he could pass all these trials, what would that mean? The Crystal Demon Emperor would undoubtedly see his true strength. The fact that he had more than 2 bloodlines, peak 9th order spiritual power, and great potential for growth. Would it allow someone like Tang San to exist? Tang San and Apos S impulse to challenge the last trial gradually subsided. He calmly dismissed the idea of continuing upward. There was no doubt in his mind as to whether he could defeat 9 of himself, but the extent of what he would need to reveal in order to do so was unpredictable. As his energy gradually recovered, Tang San stood up again, looking at the somewhat ethereal Crystal Palace not far ahead. Resolutely he turned around, preparing to head down the mountain. But at that moment, with a sudden buzz, a powerful suction force came from behind, halting his step downward. He was then pulled upward. A crystal-clear light enveloped his entire body, rendering him immobile. It seemed as if all time and space around him had been locked in that instant. The scanning sensation he had felt before reappeared. Tang San was shocked. He hadn't an Apos T encountered such a situation in any of the other palaces. Used divine consciousness to force his way out? That was impossible. Not only had he not yet recovered to the god level, but even if he had, unless he fully regained his strength, he wouldn't Apos T be a match for the Crystal Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor was undoubtedly at the peak of the 12th order, in other words a first-class god, far beyond what Tang San could contend with now. Besides, this was the Crystal Demon Emperor and Apos S domain. This is coercion. Tang San and Apos S face was full of helplessness. It seemed this battle was unavoidable. Why do you not climb further? A majestic voice echoed. Its gender was indistinguishable, and it seemed to be coming from all directions simultaneously. Tang San smiled bitterly. I feel it in Apos S impossible, so I naturally choose to retreat. Impossible? You haven't in Apos T even tried. How do you know it in Apos S impossible? Cowards can never become strong. The voice became more intense and the pressure grew more oppressive, making Tang San feel like he couldn't and Apos T breathe. Tang San and Apos S mouth twitched slightly. Obviously he couldn't and Apos T say because I and Apos am human and I and Apos am afraid you and Apos LL kill me if I reveal too much. Cowardice it was then. Yet the next moment, things took an unexpected turn. The majestic voice said in a somewhat strange tone, well, you're not wrong either. Knowing it and Apos S impossible and still trying is foolish. Furthermore, in this next trial, it and Apos S win or die once you enter. There and Apos S no second chance. This is the only way to gain the Crystal Palace and Apos S recognition. Tang San and Appo's heart shook. Then I can choose not to take the trial, right? Too late. You have already entered this trial. Good luck. The majestic voice turned cold with a hint of mockery, as if it was intent on making Tang San perish. Tang San watched as the 3 steps shifted down under his legs, placing him at the very top of the Crystal Palace and Appo's stairs. The surrounding scenery shifted, and the battlefield reappeared. Tang San took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing the surge of negative emotions that made him want to curse. He didn't have time to spew profanity. At this moment, he had no other choice but to face the impending test. If this was a life-or-death trial, there could be no hesitation. Just as he anticipated, as soon as he appeared on the battlefield, 9 figures flowed out from beneath him, quickly spreading into the distance. As expected. There really are 9 of them. While his mouth twitched, Tang San didn't and Appo's pause. He had to seize this initial moment of time difference. Without hesitation, he shook his wrists and a heavy crossbow appeared in each hand. Yes, crossbows, an enhanced version of the godly Zhuge crossbow. The 2 godly Zhuge crossbows glowed brightly, igniting with platinum light as the Lion Tiger Golden Astral infused into the amplification arrays and erupted. These 2 godly Zhuge crossbows were custom-made by Tang San. Using them required more spiritual power and greater energy infusion. Each bolt was made of black gold, designed to pierce various defenses. Moreover, at this moment, he had also infused them with the immensely powerful Lion Tiger Golden Astral, the ability of a first-tier bloodline. The 2 godly Zhuge crossbows fired almost simultaneously, each launching 81 bolts glowing with platinum light. Strangely, the bolts made no sound as they shot toward the positions where the 9 figures emerged. At the same time, Tang San had already shot forward, rushing toward one side. The godly Zhuge crossbows, with their immense power, enhanced by the Lion Tiger Golden Astral and the Black Gold and Appo's armor-piercing capability, could not be completely blocked by physical defense, even if the target was from the Mammoth Demon clan. However, these 9 figures were vastly different from those before. Just as the bolts were about to strike them, they suddenly erupted with intense platinum light, with platinum flames rising from their bodies. Tang San and Appo's expression changed drastically, because he recognized this phenomenon. These were signs of life force ignition. The replicas were directly burning their own bloodlines to gain immense power instantly. Not only were there 9 of them, but they could also use this kind of ability. The bolts of the godly Zhuge crossbows exploded in the face of the platinum flames, but the shards were still powerful. Though they couldn't and Appo's deal fatal injuries to the replicas, they did force them to retreat. The flames of the replicas also exploded outward. Though all of them were pierced by a number of bolts, none of the wounds were fatal. At this moment, Tang San had already lunged at the leftmost replica. This was a life-and-death battle, and he couldn't and Appo's take any chance. What if the opponent was deceiving him? Someone like the Crystal Demon Emperor couldn't care less about his life or death, after all, and he was probably viewed as nothing more than a plaything. No matter what, he couldn't and Appo's afford to lose this battle. The leftmost replica had taken fewer bolts from the godly Zhuge crossbows, but it had been pushed back. At that moment, Tang San reached it. However, this replica clearly sensed the danger. Compared to the previous 3 replicas, its fighting spirit was significantly stronger. The burning Lion Tiger Golden Astral around it suddenly exploded. Yes, it was an explosion, not an eruption, and as Tang San realized, it was not just the flames but the replica and Appo's entire body. Its Lion Tiger Golden Astral burst out, transforming into terrifying platinum flames that swept over everything around, especially in Tang San and Appo's direction. What the hell, are they self-destructing now? Tang San and Appo's right foot touched the ground like lightning, and the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear he had just formed struck the ground, instantly halting his forward momentum. But even so, the erupting Lion Tiger Golden Astral was still upon him the next instant. Tang San knew the power of these flames. The brilliance unleashed by the exploding body would at least push him back, or even injure him if it landed on him. This was even considering that the crossbow bolts had wounded the replica. If he was pushed back, the other 8 replicas could just burn their bloodlines and attack simultaneously, and that would spell his doom. He couldn't and Appo's T retreat and Kuden and Appos, T afford to get injured now. With a silent sigh, Tang San understood it was no longer an option to keep his other abilities a secret. He shone with silvery light, and the next moment, he vanished into thin air before the overwhelming flames could reach him. Yes, he simply disappeared. Peacock spatial control, peacock transformation. In an instant, Tang San teleported and appeared behind the replica on the far side. This replica had just stabilized and was about to charge toward the explosion and Appos' direction to join the assault on the injured Tang San. The blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, infused with the Lion-Tiger Golden Astral Explosion, pierced through the back of the replica without hesitation. Everything happened incredibly fast. The replica stiffened instantly, but the next moment, its Lion-Tiger Golden Astral erupted, and another self-destruction occurred. Tang San vanished with a flash, teleporting away to avoid the explosion. However, when he appeared beside another replica, he immediately teleported again, moving tens of meters away just in time. 7 replicas remained. In this brief period, they had gathered together, forming a circle and facing outward, each holding a blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear. The same fury of the masses instantly covered all the space around them. If Tang San and Appos' teleportation had been even a fraction slower, he would have been engulfed by the fearsome spear lights. Tang San was slightly out of breath. Clearly, these new replicas were different not just in number but in quality as well. Their combat awareness had significantly increased, and they seemed to have learned battle formations. Tang San instantly decided on his strategy. The remaining 7 replicas were all burning their bloodline power. Even though Lion-Tiger Golden Astral was powerful, the consumption was enormous. The replicas were ultimately still copies of him. Tang San was well aware how long he could sustain burning his bloodline. Using the already exposed peacock transformation, he only needed to stay away from his opponents, letting their bloodline power burn out, which would be his moment of victory. However, the 7 replicas suddenly changed formation at that moment, lining up and facing Tang San. Simultaneously, 7 enormous lion tigers with platinum fur appeared behind them, roaring thunderously at Tang San. Instantly, a deafening sonic wave erupted, making the entire combat space seem to explode at that moment. An intense dizziness nearly caused Tang San to paralyze. The roars that the 7 replicas were using were clearly an ability of the lion-tiger bloodline. The problem was that Tang San himself was not even aware that such an ability existed, much less able to master it. Now that he thought about it, it made perfect sense. In nature, lion and tiger roars were extremely powerful. Combined and augmented by the lion-tiger golden astral, the power was unimaginable. The simultaneous explosion of the 7-fold lion-tiger roar seemed to shatter the entire space around him. At this moment, even if he wanted to teleport to avoid the roars, it was already too late. If the 7 replicas surrounded him, he would undoubtedly die. Each replica burning its bloodline power was a peak 8th order powerhouse with dual bloodlines, one of which was first tier. So, sensing the danger, Tang San made a quick decision. Facing the lion-tiger roar from so many replicas, enduring it head-on would only be possible if he fully unleashed his divine consciousness. But that was without a doubt unwise. Revealing his divine consciousness was far worse than exposing other abilities. The flow of time in front of Tang San suddenly slowed, causing the loud roar to become sluggish in an instant. The sound waves themselves slowed down. There was no other way. At this moment, Tang San could only use the abilities of the Chrono-Croc transformation to slow the incoming sound waves. Taking advantage of this momentary slowdown, the rate at which the sound waves destroyed the space around Tang San also slowed. The space still disintegrated into fragments but was stable enough for all practical purposes. In the next moment, a silver light appeared on Tang San, and he teleported again. However, this time he chose not to teleport far away. On the contrary, he instantly appeared behind the 7 replicas. The lion-tiger roar was directed toward his previous position, and the 7 replicas were standing in a line. In other words, behind them was where space was most stable. The moment he reappeared, the flow of time changed again, shifting from slow to accelerated. The terrifying sound waves accelerated away, and one could even see the distant space marred by a web of black cracks. If he had stayed there, he would have died instantly. The acceleration of time also caused Tang San and Appo's speed to increase. In his hand, the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear thrust out hundreds of times in an instant, covering the 7 replicas with innumerable spear lights. At this moment, Tang San was using his full strength. The 2 replicas on the left were almost instantly pierced. But as soon as the first one was touched by the spear lights, it immediately self-destructed. The second one did the same, forcing Tang San to stop the time acceleration in order to avoid being caught in the explosion. He could no longer use the time-slowing effect. The earlier use of the chrono-croc transformation to slow a large area had been a huge burden on his spiritual power. In this situation, he had no choice but to teleport away. He couldn't and Appo's finish off the remaining 5 replicas, but on the bright side those 5 were also hit by his spear lights, only avoiding fatal wounds by using Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track. In addition, the violent explosions also blew away the remaining 5 replicas. That powerful explosive force was not easy to withstand, even while burning their own bloodline power. The replica closest to the 2 exploding ones was the most unfortunate. Half its body was blasted to bits, and it was clear that it couldn't continue fighting. At this moment, Tang San wasn't in Appo's in good shape either. After continuously using Lion Tiger transformation, Chrono Croc transformation, and Peacock transformation under such high stress, his bloodline power was momentarily exhausted. He had to give up the opportunity to continue the chase and catch his breath. The remaining 4 combat-capable replicas were also injured, but the situation was clearly much better than it had been initially. As he was planning his next move, a deep, melodious voice suddenly sounded from one of the replicas. "Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 types of bloodline power, with at least 2 being first-tier bloodlines." Interesting, very interesting. Tang San and Appo's heart tightened. The next moment he saw the remaining 4 replicas slowly merging, quickly fusing into one. Even the near-death half-replica was absorbed, becoming part of the whole. After the fusion, the replica and Appo's eyes clearly became more animated, carrying a cold gleam as it looked at Tang San. Tang San supported himself with the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, his gaze fixed on it without speaking. But in his heart he felt a sinking sensation. He understood that he had likely attracted the attention of the Crystal Demon Emperor. This was probably no longer an actual test. Holding a blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, the replica slowly walked toward Tang San. As it moved, a layer of magnificent crystal armor gradually appeared on its body. This crystal armor was a faint ice blue, radiating a beautiful glow. Each reflective surface seemed to capture Tang San and Appo's image, causing his thoughts to slow down. "You two came together. The other one is still holding on. Chrono Croc transformation, however, compared to you he is far inferior. I didn't and Appo's expect to encounter such an interesting human. You now have 2 choices. First, I can let you go, but you will fail the test and your companion will die. Second, you can endure my attacks for 1 minute. I will use the combined power of those replicas along with my abilities. If you withstand it, your companion will live and you will pass the test. Now tell me your choice." Tang San took a deep breath and slowly straightened his back, his expression calm. "Your Majesty, with your status, why make things difficult for someone as insignificant as me? This should be beyond the standard test, right?" The replica indifferently said, "Here, on this continent, I am the ruler. Whatever I say goes. Whatever I want happens." Facing this calm yet domineering reply, Tang San and Appo's expression remained unchanged. "Then I request this of you. I will take your test and try to hold out for a minute. But I need your promise. If I lose, please spare my companion. If I win, you cannot enslave me. Otherwise, there and Appo's no chance for me to survive, so you might as well kill me now." The replica and Appo's gaze seemed to change as it looked at Tang San. After a moment of silence, it said calmly, "All right, I promise you." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Tang San bowed slightly in respect. The replica said indifferently, "You Don and Appo's need to thank me. I won and Appo's hold back. What you will face is me at the 9th Order, and in that era, I was already unbeatable among my peers." As it spoke, the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear in its hand slowly rose, pointing at Tang San. Tang San took a deep breath and slowly raised his blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear. He knew that in this battle, apart from his divine consciousness, he couldn't oppose hide anything anymore. Otherwise, he would undoubtedly die, and revealing his divine consciousness would likely also lead to his death. The replica, or rather, the Crystal Demon Emperor, suddenly pointed the blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear forward, and fury of the masses erupted almost instantly. It was Tang San and Appo's spear technique, and when the spear thrust out, the surrounding time flow suddenly accelerated. Chrono-Croc transformation. Yes, it was the instantaneous Chrono-Croc transformation time acceleration. Tang San didn't oppose to even have the chance to dodge. The spear light was already upon him. What and oppose? Even more terrifying was that in that instant, the space around Tang San shattered, collapsing instantly. Peacock transformation spatial shattering. What he knew the Crystal Demon Emperor also knew. Without any hesitation, Tang San activated his technique in an instant. Chrono-Croc transformation, time slowing. The spear lights initially burst out violently, suddenly slowed down, but they were already in front of Tang San. And all Tang San needed was to buy himself this fleeting moment. A strange arc was traced from the spear with a flick of his blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear. At this moment Tang San and Appo's expression was grave. He seemed oblivious to the collapsing space around him, and the immense pressure from the Crystal Demon Emperor. All his focus was on the arc created by his spear. The strange arc caught the eye of the Crystal Demon Emperor, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. The arc suddenly encompassed all the spear lights he had thrust out and vanished without a trace. What kind of ability is this? The Crystal Demon Emperor didn't oppose to continue his attack. A gleam flashed across the surface of his crystal armor, and the next moment, he traced an arc with his blue-silver Emperor Tyrant Spear, mimicking Tang San and Appo's movements. But a strange scene unfolded. The arc he traced seemed to be missing something as it was just an arc. Taking advantage of this moment, Tang San caught his breath. He didn't oppose to retreat or try to restore the shattered space around him. Instead, a pair of wings suddenly unfolded on his back and flapped fiercely. Propelled by the golden wings, he charged towards the Crystal Demon Emperor like a golden meteor. The offense is the best defense. This battlefield was the Crystal Demon Emperor and Appo's domain. He wouldn't oppose to blindly flee just because of the 1-minute agreement. To truly pass this test, he needed to defeat this replica. Oh, a fifth one? The Crystal Demon Emperor and Appo's eyes lit up. He stopped tracing the arc with his spear, and platinum flames suddenly surged from his body. As he thrust his spear, a pair of magnificent rose-colored wings abruptly unfolded behind him. They were flaming wings, and behind them, a gigantic image of a fire phoenix appeared, emitting a long resonant cry. Tang San felt his golden wings suddenly grow weak, and his speed drastically decreased. The Crystal Demon Emperor and Appo's spear, wreathed in platinum and rose-colored flames, was already in front of him. Spatial lockdown followed, leaving him with no way to evade. A fire phoenix? Could this be the phoenix flame of the undying Demon Emperor? The omnipotent Crystal Demon Emperor. Whatever you know, he knows. Whatever you don and oppose, he still knows. Tang San bit the tip of his tongue hard, using the pain to dispel his sense of weakness. Then he locked his gaze onto the Crystal Demon Emperor and Appo's eyes. Blinding purple gold light burst forth almost instantly. He hadn't oppose to use the purple demon eyes in all the previous battles, but now in this crucial moment, he unleashed them. The spear thrust by the Crystal Demon Emperor almost instantly halted, and even the Phoenix Phantom behind him showed signs of dissipating. Having fused the bloodline power of 4.5 replicas, its overall energy level had undoubtedly reached Tang San and Appo's 9th order strength, while Tang San himself was only at the 8th order. However, in terms of spiritual power, Tang San was already at the peak of the 9th order. Even with the fusion of several replicas, unless it broke through to the god level, it would still be at the peak of the 9th order. The spear, infused initially with 2 powerful bloodlines, suddenly became much softer under these circumstances. Without the control of spiritual power, the surrounding space shattering also paused. Tang San seized this opportunity. When the opponent was distracted, he first activated the discerning eye of heaven, because only in this moment could the crystal demon emperor possibly not notice his celestial fox transformation. With fortune on his side, he applied it to himself. Unifying his essence, energy, and spirit, he poured them into the spear in his hand. Merging with the spear, he made an all-or-nothing strike. The blue-silver Emperor Tyrant spear in the crystal demon emperor and Appo's hand was shattered by Tang San with a loud bang. His own spear instantly reached the opponent and Appo's face.